Chapter 420. Brother Crown Prince, you shouldn't have come. You should be getting married, not appearing here. Gong Yimo felt a little helpless. Now that he was here, the city must be in chaos. What does it matter? She's not the woman I want to marry. I only want to marry you. Imoa. Gong Che took a step forward and held her hand. Imoa, the person I love is you. I only want to be with you. I always thought that I could only have you when I became the emperor, but now I know that I was wrong. I can elope with you. We can go wherever we want. No one will be able to restrain us anymore. Gong Yimo was frightened by his sudden words. Even if she knew his feelings now, she still didn't want to elope? Okay? Brother Crown Prince. Gong Yimo suppressed the shock in her heart and said seriously, the person you want to marry is Su Miaolon. Before it's too late, you should hurry back. Otherwise, Imperial Father will be angry. As she spoke, she wanted to withdraw her hand, but this time, Gong Che didn't let go. Instead, he held her tightly. I'm not going to marry her. He stared at Gong Yimo and frowned slightly. And more, I don't want to marry her. I broke through everything to come to you. It means that I've decided to give up everything. I only want you. Only you. I know it's hard for you to accept at the moment, but please don't reject me with such cruel words. Gong Yimo sighed. Brother Crown Prince, don't be like this. You have your own path to walk. Don't insist on these feelings that shouldn't have happened. As for me, I have to hurry on my way. What did she mean by shouldn't have happened? Gong Che grabbed Gong Yimo's hand and placed it on his chest. Is there something wrong with me? As long as you say it, I'll definitely change. Don't leave me. I'll do anything you want. He was already possessed. Gong Yimo forced herself to harden her heart. She withdrew her hand and looked at him seriously. Enough. Big Brother Crown Prince, I only helped you twice when we were young. If it weren't for those things, you would have definitely married Su Miaolon. Even if everything had to be redone, even if you married me today, you would still like a woman like Su Miaolon in the future. Go back. Gong Yimo was talking about her past life, but the fire in Gong Che's eyes grew brighter and brighter. Imoa, will you let me marry you? Just thinking about it made him so excited that he couldn't control himself. How great would it be if he married Imoa today? That would be the happiest day of his life. As long as you are willing to marry me, I will prove my sincerity to you. Gong Yimo was speechless. In her previous life, she had married him at the age of 18, but in the end, he still fell in love with someone else. In this life, what exactly had gone wrong that caused him to have such a different reaction? Gong Che saw that Gong Yimo wasn't speaking, so he hurriedly took a step forward. Imoa, marry me. If you are worried that I will have a change of heart, Gong Che, can use my life status and everything I have to swear. If I betray you, I will die a horrible death. He was a little conflicted as he thought about it. Or you can have any guarantee that you want. Everything I have will be yours. As long as you give me a chance, let me prove that I love you, to the point that I will not hesitate to die for you. His words coincided with her past life, making her feel very uncomfortable. Gong Yimo slightly frowned and wanted to avoid him, but Gong Che hugged her. Imoa, Imoa, Imoa. He used his most sentimental voice beside Gong Yimo's ear, calling her name over and over again. His hands tightly hugged her, as if she was his everything. Imoa, I don't want you to promise me now. Just let me see you like this forever, okay? Imoa, you will never understand how much I love you. Every night, I can only fall asleep when I think of you. Every time I encounter a problem, I can only think of you in the future to have the strength to solve it. Since I was 16, I have been fantasizing about every part of your body. Fantasizing about being entangled with you to the bone. Imoa, I'm already so deeply immersed in it that I can't extricate myself. Don't go. I used the wrong method in the past. Stay with me now, okay? I will prove to you how much I love you. Gong Yimo was almost suffocated by his embrace. She said coldly, my brother Crown Prince cares about the people and aspires to be a wise ruler. But if you continue to be stubborn, you will only be called a fatuous ruler. Is all of this worth it? It is. Gong Che let go of her and told her loudly with certainty. His gaze traced her face bit by bit, and he said softly, It is worth it. I used to think that being a good ruler was my greatest dream, but now the vast country is nothing in my eyes. Immerse, give me a chance, okay? I will use my life to prove that I love you. You don't have a chance. Gong Yimo, who was in his embrace, suddenly said coldly. Instead of letting him be in pain and pester her endlessly, she would rather let him give up. So Gong Yimo looked at him and told him seriously, I have already decided I want Gong die. She want Gong die. These few words were like the edge of a knife, causing Gong Che to instantly twist in pain. He took a while to digest these words, and he was completely stunned. This was the first time she said that she liked someone else, and that person was Gong Dai. You are lying to me. I am not lying to you. Gong Yimo told him seriously, I've already decided to be together with Gong Dai, so you should go back and get married. No. Gong Che suddenly pushed her and then grabbed her shoulders with both hands. At this moment, his eyes were bloodshot, and his face was frighteningly dark. Haha, this is not true. It is true. Then tell me. Gong Che suddenly looked at her with an extremely sorrowful gaze and said angrily, Then tell me. We are both your blood relatives. Why can you accept him but not me? How is he better than me? He is giving way to you, not even giving me a chance. Gong Yimo closed her eyes. The knot in her heart from her previous life was destined to make it hard for her to accept Gong Che in this life, no matter how much he changed. No matter what, I have already made up my mind. Gong Yimo saw that his face had lost all color, and she could not bear to agitate him any further, so she said softly, Crown Prince Gitch, go back before it is too late. It is too late, Gong Che suddenly said, and let go of her shoulders. The coldness in his tone made Gong Yimo frown slightly. When she looked up, she saw that his eyes were frighteningly red. He was like a trapped beast that had been forced to a dead end, and he had already gone crazy. Before coming here, Gong Che could still deceive himself and others, and he still had a chance. But now he heard Gong Yimo admit that she liked Gong Dai. At that moment, his blood seemed to have frozen, and all his thoughts collapsed. There was a qualitative change. Chapter 421. The sound of horses galloping could be heard from afar. It was the Imperial Guards sent by the Emperor. They were here under orders to bring the Crown Prince back for his wedding. Gong Yimo was a little anxious. Brother Crown Prince. But the moment she called out, Gong Che suddenly closed his eyes. Then he tore off the golden crown on his head and threw it on the ground. In an instant, his hair flew in the wind. His face, which was as gentle as an immortal, was now as enchanting as a demon. Gong Yimo was a little confused about the change in him. She looked at him cautiously and did not say a word. The sound of horses galloping was getting closer and closer. As if afraid that he would escape, the horses galloped over, kicking up endless yellow sand. Gong Che opened his eyes again and looked at Gong Yimo. He suddenly smiled. His flying black hair and blood-red clothes formed a very impactful picture. His face was as pale as paper, and his lips were bloodless. But his eyes, they were bloodshot, ferocious, dangerous, and frightening. They clung on to Gong Yimo. His gaze fell on Gong Yimo again, causing Gong Yimo to feel a chill run down her spine. Even though the other party was the Crown Prince, who didn't even have the strength to truss up a chicken, she still took a step back cautiously. Do you know? Behind them, the sound of the Imperial Guards approaching could be heard. But when he looked at Gong Yimo, his bloodshot eyes gradually recovered. It was as if he had become a completely different person, becoming extremely dangerous and frightening. I used to think that by waiting and giving in, I would get everything. And my everything is you. His tone was smiling, but it sent chills down one's spine. Gong Yimo's face was tense, and she did not say a word. On the other side, the Imperial Guards were very close. Gong Che was still calm and said in a very calm and cold voice, But now I know that I was wrong. He curved his bloodless lips and smiled evilly. When it comes to you, I can only have you by force and plunder. His words made Gong Yimo's heart skip a beat. He suddenly took a step forward, and before she could retreat, he grabbed her hand and planted a cold and trembling kiss on her palm. He was not as strong as he appeared to be. Even if his heart was numb from the pain, it would still hurt. But he was already different. He wouldn't wait any longer, and he wouldn't give in anymore. He wanted to take back everything that belonged to him. Immerse, amidst his messy hair, his eyes were gloomy, as if he had come from the depths of hell. You will be mine in the end. I will chase after you for the rest of my life, until I obtain you, and until the day I die. Gong Yimo was shocked by his strange words and quickly retracted her hand. On the other side, the Imperial Guards had all stopped their horses and knelt behind Gong Che. Invite the Crown Prince back to the capital, they shouted in unison. In their hearts, they were still shocked by what they had just seen. But at this moment, Gong Che's strange and powerful aura made them not dare to say a word. Gong Che ignored them. Instead, he traced the face in front of him over and over again. It was greedy and evil. Gong Yimo took a deep breath and frowned. She said in a hoarse voice, "Let's go back. Don't be stubborn." Gong Che chuckled softly and gently placed her hand back by her side. He then used a very, very soft voice to inform her, "I'm already beyond redemption." After saying that, he suddenly lowered his head and kissed Gong Yimo's lips. He pressed her onto the horse. The horse neighed, but did not leave. Gong Yimo was shocked by his action, and her eyes widened. Gong Che actually kissed her in front of so many people. Before Gong Yimo could push him away, Gong Che had already retreated. But before he retreated, he fiercely bit her, causing her to groan. In an instant, blood stained their lips. There was an indescribable, evil charm. He smiled like a demon that had sucked blood, glowing with a demonic color. "Go, Immerse. I'll wait for your return in Dai state." And he also wanted to hold power in his hands during this period of time. After saying that, he suddenly turned around. His long black hair intertwined, and his blood-red robe was complicated. He actually gave off a sorrowful feeling. That red was not his robe, but his blood. It was the blood that flowed out from his chest. Not only was Gong Yimo stunned, the Imperial Guards wanted to poke their own eyes out. What did they see? The Crown Prince kissed the princess? But before they could react, Gong Che had already mounted his horse and left without looking back. The Imperial Guards quickly chased after him, afraid that they would lose him again. Gong Yimo touched the blood on her lips and suddenly felt sad. She did not want to hurt anyone, but Gong Che was still hurt because of her. Could this be God's will? When Gong Che returned, everyone was waiting for him at the palace gate. On the other hand, Gong Cheng's angry face turned to worry the moment he saw Gong Che, the Crown Prince. The reason he was the Crown Prince was because he was the role model for everyone in Dayu. There could not be any mistakes. Fortunately, the Crown Prince had always done well. He was brilliant in his literary talent, gentle and humble, elegant and diligent. No one had seen the Crown Prince like this before. At this moment, he was riding on his horse. Although he was smiling, his disheveled hair and his blood-red robe seemed to intertwine with the demeanor of hell. His face was pale and bloodless, and so was his lips. But when he smiled at the crowd, he gave off a magnificent and beautiful feeling. But the heavy aura around him made no one dare to speak, even though he had done something so overboard. Emperor Cheng stared at him coldly. He watched him dismount from his horse and kneel in front of him, but he still said with a smiling voice, "Father, this son suddenly had an urgent matter and missed the auspicious time. Is this marriage still necessary?" When he said this, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Was this frivolous and arrogant person really the Crown Prince? Even Su Miaolon, who was in the palanquin, tensed up. She clearly felt that the Crown Prince was different. What happened just now? Emperor Cheng found his voice after a long time. "Do you know what you're saying?" Gong Che raised his head and looked straight into his eyes. This son said, "I will not marry her." The father and son confronted each other. Everyone present felt the surging undercurrent. In fact, in such a situation, the Crown Prince refused to marry and had already made up his mind. No one could force him. At most, the Crown Prince would be disciplined. But the woman whose marriage was canceled, even if she did not die, she would have to be a Buddha for the rest of her life. Emperor Cheng was shocked by Gong Che's change. He could feel that the change in his son's temperament was only temporary. He had been severely stimulated. But if he forced him to marry again, then it was very likely that he would completely become a different person. This change was risky. Emperor Cheng did not dare to take the risk. He opened his mouth and almost wanted to reprimand him, but he agreed to his ridiculous request. Anyway, no matter how important reputation was, could it be more important than his son? Chapter 422. Woo woo woo. A woman's cries suddenly burst out from the sedan. Then, Su Miaoan suddenly rushed out and knelt on the ground. Your Majesty, since the crown prince refuses to marry me, he must have another sweetheart. Miaoan is willing to fulfill your Majesty's wish. As she spoke, she bumped into the sedan, but was stopped by the Marquis in time. The Marquis looked at his grief-stricken daughter, then looked at the calm crown prince and gritted his teeth. Your Majesty, I have assisted you for so many years. Even if I didn't make any contributions, I still worked hard. Why would the crown prince humiliate my daughter like this? My poor Lan, woo-woo, don't say any more. Father, perhaps His Majesty really has someone else in his heart. You should let your daughter die. Gong Che sneered. Su Miaoan still wanted to threaten him, but he had already made up his mind. He would never marry her. But Gong Cheng's expression gradually became dignified. How could he forget that Che liked Immerse? If he didn't marry, when Immerse returned from Yuchi, it would be a mess. So even if he couldn't bear it, he still said it. Nonsense. Crown Prince, you got guts. Quickly apologize to the Crown Princess. The moment he said the Crown Princess, the marriage was set in stone. After all, the Emperor had a golden mouth. If he said Su Miaoan was the Crown Princess, then she was the Crown Princess. Hearing his words, Gong Che suddenly stood up. He brushed the dust off his clothes, lowered his eyelids, and said calmly, She wants to be the Crown Princess. Fine, I won't be the Crown Prince, okay? This sentence could be said to make everyone present tense, especially Su Miaoan. She felt as if someone had ruthlessly slapped her face. It was burning with pain. You. Gong Cheng was infuriated by his words. Bastard. At this time, Changshi hurried forward to support him. Your Majesty, please calm down, Your Majesty. The veins on Gong Cheng's neck bulged. Calm down. He clearly wants to anger me to death. As he spoke, he strode forward, grabbed his son's collar, and fiercely glared at him. Get married for me. Gong Che laughed out loud. Imperial father, even if you kill me, I'll still say the same thing. He had already made up his mind not to marry Su Miaoan. He must break the engagement. He was ruthless, but Gong Cheng was even more ruthless. He grinned hideously and whispered something into Gong Che's ear. Gong Che's originally indifferent expression suddenly turned gloomy. The Emperor said, If you don't want to get married and marry Su Miaoan, that's fine. But when Immerse returns, we will execute her. Or, if we accidentally die in the process, we will also order for her to be buried with us. You can try. Gong Che coldly stared at his father's face. He never thought that his father, who loved Immerse so much, would actually threaten him with killing Immerse. Originally, he thought his heart wouldn't hurt anymore. But when the Emperor used Immerse's life to threaten him to marry someone else, his heart couldn't help but hurt. He could even risk his life, but he couldn't bear to let Immerse suffer even a little bit of harm. This feeling of powerlessness was suffocating. Imperial father, you're forcing me. I am forcing you. Gong Cheng grabbed his collar, lowered his voice, and said word by word, You don't know, right? Immerse trusts me without a doubt. The day before yesterday, if I didn't have the heart to know about the matter between you and her, she would have almost been poisoned to death by me. Gong Cheng's words made Gong Che's blood turn cold. He actually dared to do it, but he, who was being threatened, was being eaten alive. He was like a trapped beast, glaring at his biological father. Gong Cheng was frightened by the look in his eyes, so he suddenly let go of him. If you don't want me to do this now, immediately get married. Gong Che was pushed by Gong Cheng's last push. He indifferently tidied up his clothes, and finally his eyes fell on Su Miaoan. Even so, you still want me to marry you?" His voice was cold, as if it came from the bottom of the abyss. Su Miaolon made up her mind in an instant. She pushed her father away and knelt in front of Gong Che. "Miaolon admires your highness. No matter what, I'm willing to marry you." She believed that as long as she married Gong Che, he would definitely change his mind. Gong Che was still stubborn, but he still didn't know how good she was. Gong Che suddenly laughed. His laughter grew louder and louder, and it also became more and more miserable. Just a second ago, he was ruthlessly rejected by his beloved. The next second, his biological father used his beloved woman's life to threaten him to marry another woman. And this woman, at this point, still wanted to marry him. Really, was there anything funnier than this? After laughing, Gong Che suddenly stepped forward, bent down, and lifted Su Miaolon's chin. At that moment, he looked at Su Miaolon with a gloomy expression that he himself didn't realize. He said in a very cold and mocking voice, "Was I in a hurry to marry you in my previous life, so I can't get rid of you in this life?" Hearing this, Gong Chang had a headache. Fortunately, the common people had been driven away. Otherwise, he would have lost face among them. "Someone come, tie the crown for the crown prince." "No need." Gong Chang got up and coldly refused. Then, he looked down at Su Miaolon condescendingly. "Presumably, with your love for me, you wouldn't care about my disheveled wedding, right?" Su Miaolon's face twisted again. She lowered her head, and after a long while, she gritted her teeth and said in a forbearing tone, "I don't care. Then what are you waiting for?" Gong Che laughed and turned around. "Why haven't you followed me into the palace to perform the wedding ceremony? Presumably, Imperial Father can't wait any longer." After saying that, he actually went into the palace first. Su Miaolon had no choice but to clench her teeth and follow him. The others also crowded around him. However, during the whole process, no one dared to make any noise. The whole wedding was called a wedding banquet, but it was more solemn than a funeral banquet. But it wasn't over yet. When he passed by Gong Chang, Gong Che seemed to have thought of something and said, "Imperial Father, this son is overjoyed. Why don't I see ninth brother?" After saying that, he smiled coldly. "That's right. Ninth brother is a busy man. It's fine if he doesn't come to this kind of small banquet." He said it lightly, but it had a different meaning when it fell into the ears of those who were paying attention. This crown prince and Prince Chi, it seems like they're going to quarrel. He left after saying that, but Gong Chang was so angry that he clutched his chest. "Chang," she said with a sullen face, "Your Majesty, please take care of your body." "Take care?" Gong Chang laughed angrily. "These two are all here to collect debts. They can't wait to anger me to death. Where's Gong Dai? Go tell Gong Dai to come to the wedding banquet. It's the crown prince's wedding. How can he not come?" Chang Shi hurriedly sent someone, but in his heart he sighed. The situation they were most worried about still happened, and all these changes had already circled around countless times in everyone's heart. The capital was gathering wind and clouds. It seems like the sky is about to change. Chapter 423. Gong Emo was drenched by the rain halfway through her journey. She was somewhat depressed as she hid under a big tree, looking in the direction of the capital. Gong Che, he should be married by now. Why did she feel uneasy? It was as if someone was drumming beside her ear, making her feel uneasy. What was the reason for her uneasiness? Was it the look in his eyes at the end, or the words beyond redemption? At this moment, a bolt of lightning flashed across the sky. The rain seemed to have gotten heavier. Under the tree, Gong Emo reached out to catch the rainwater. She looked at the chaos between heaven and earth. Her expression was bleak. She suddenly felt a little lost about the future. In the capital, Gong Dai did not take a sedan. Instead, he rode a horse to the capital. He was drenched by the rain, but his eyes were looking straight ahead, as if he did not feel anything. The people on both sides of the street quickly packed up their stalls and went back. They were still cursing. It was such a good day, but the heavens were not on their side. Otherwise, they could have made a lot of money on this joyous day. Gong Dai's black clothes clung to his body. On the way, he met the person announcing the imperial edict. The emperor ordered him to attend the banquet immediately. The horse stopped. He looked at the eunuch coldly. The eunuch kneeled on the street and did not dare to raise his head for a long time. The heavy rain was mixed with his cold voice. But what happened? The eunuch did not dare to raise his head. In the rain, he said loudly, "This, Your Highness will know when you get there." After all, they were on the street. If this matter was spread by his mouth, the Marquis would not let him go. Gong Dai curled his lips. He looked in the direction of the capital and smiled coldly. He was a little curious. On the other side, a large group of people in the palace were drenched. There was no other reason. It was because the crown prince was walking too slowly. Did they want to pass the crown prince and leave first? They could only endure it. Gong Che seemed to be enjoying the baptism of the rain. The rain was turbulent and fell from his face to his chin. It was wet to the bone, but it made him feel extremely warm. His long black hair was wet. Strands of it stuck to the side of his face. His wedding robes were the color of coagulated blood. They hung close to his body. He closed his eyes and suddenly stopped. The surrounding people were angry, but they didn't dare to say anything. Su Miaolon, who had been following behind him, was even more miserable. Her makeup was completely ruined. Needless to say, after today, she would become the laughingstock of the entire city. But now that things had come to this, she had no other choice. She had to marry the crown prince. Only then would she have the chance to wash away today's humiliation. As she thought of this, she gloomily looked at the crown prince in front of her. One day, she would make the crown prince beg her to love him. Now that the crown prince had stopped, she had no choice but to stop as well. She prayed in her heart that he wouldn't cause any more trouble at this final juncture. "Your Highness, what's wrong?" Someone braced himself and asked. The rain continued to wash his face, blurring his vision. He didn't even dare to wipe it away, because he could already feel Gong Che's cold gaze staring at him. "Nothing." Gong Che's angry voice sounded. "It's just that ninth brother and I have a deep brotherly relationship. He hasn't arrived yet, so how can I leave first? I want to wait for him." "In such a heavy rain, you're the crown prince. Why would you wait for a prince?" Everyone went crazy. Behind them, Emperor Gong rushed over in a palanquin. In the end, he saw this group of people standing on the palace road instead of leaving. He couldn't help but have a headache. What kind of trouble is Gong Che trying to cause? Chong, she went to ask and came back, trembling with fear. His Highness said that he wants to wait for Prince Shi to arrive so that we can leave together. After Chong Shi finished speaking, he thought that Emperor Gong would be furious. But after a while, he actually heard Emperor Gong's laughter. Could it be that he was too stimulated that he went crazy? "Ha ha!" Emperor Gong laughed. He looked at the pouring rain outside with a sneer on his face. Che is right. Gong Dai, this child, is becoming more and more disobedient. On such an important day, he didn't know to come earlier. If you want to wait, then wait together. When the emperor said this, everyone kept quiet out of fear. They really all waited in the heavy rain. On such a joyous day, a pair of newlyweds, plus the emperor, waiting for a prince together. What does this mean? Are they looking for trouble with Gong Dai? The rain was getting heavier and heavier. Many people were a little angry with Gong Dai. This Prince Chi is really too much. On such a day, what is he doing? Why hasn't he come yet? Does he even put the emperor and the crown prince in his eyes? Su Miaolon hated Gong Dai even more. She resentfully looked in the direction she came from. She felt that this was definitely the most humiliating road she had ever walked in her life. When Gong Dai arrived, he saw such a scene. Everyone was waiting for him, including the emperor. His expression froze. He strode to the emperor and asked for forgiveness. After a long time, the emperor sneered. "Do you still put me in your eyes?" The emperor was in the palanquin and didn't show his face. Gong Dai stood in the rain. His whole back was straight, neither servile nor overbearing. "Please forgive me, imperial father." Gong Chung snorted. "There's no need to ask me for forgiveness. Today is the crown prince's wedding, but the crown prince has been waiting for you in the rain for a long time. You might as well go find the crown prince and crown princess and asked for forgiveness. Gong Dai's eyes slightly narrowed. He was stunned for a moment, then finally smiled. This son obeys the decree. Then he walked in front of the crown prince. Everyone spontaneously stepped aside, leaving the two standing opposite each other. For a long time, the relationship between the two had been very cold. However, they had cooperated a lot. After all, Gong Dai wanted to borrow Gong Che's waterway to do business. Sometimes, Gong Che would also let Gong Dai deal with his political enemies. Therefore, in the eyes of the world, although the two of them didn't get along, it wasn't as obvious as now. Under everyone's gaze, Gong Dai first bowed and asked for forgiveness. I have made Imperial Brother wait for so long. This is Imperial Brother's fault. Please forgive me. Where have you been? Gong Che looked coldly at Gong Dai and said his first sentence. Gong Dai straightened up and smiled coldly. I sent someone out of the capital, then went back. Gong Che smiled. It seems that Imperial Brother has a lot of opinions about Imperial Brother. Otherwise, why would you be late even on Imperial Brother's wedding day? This matter could be said to be big or small. If Gong Che laughed it off, he could pretend that nothing happened. However, if Gong Che wanted to pursue the matter, this would be a crime of great disrespect. Gong Dai looked at the silent crowd and said softly, How could it be? Speaking of this matter, it is indeed Imperial Brother's fault. Later, Imperial Brother will offer a generous gift to express my apology. No need for a generous gift. Gong Che shook his head childishly, then grinned at Gong Dai. In the past, whenever I did something wrong, the Grand Tutor would whip me. Today, since Imperial Brother has done something wrong, shouldn't you do the same? At this moment, Gong Dai raised his eyebrows slightly. You want to whip me? Here now. Gong Che smiled faintly. Why not? Chapter 4:24. Why not? Gong Dai did not speak, but the people around Gong Che clearly heard him speak in a disdainful tone. Bring me the whip. He was really going to hit him. The officials present all looked at each other. What was going on today? It was supposed to be a wedding, but first, the crown prince ran away. Then he refused the marriage, and now he was looking for trouble with Prince Chi. Some of the more quick-witted people could not help but think that today's wedding was just a small matter. The real big thing was that these two important figures were going to fight each other. But why? The palace servant behind the crown prince hesitated for a moment, but still went to fetch the whip. Gong Dai narrowed his eyes as he looked at Gong Che, a dangerous light flashing in his eyes. Gong Che acted as if he did not see any of this. When the palace servant returned, he directly reached out and took the whip from him. The gem-embedded whip looked very exquisite, and it made the hand holding the whip look as white as jade. Gong Che pointed the whip at Gong Dai and suddenly shouted in the rain, All of you, get out of my way. When the crowd heard this, they looked at the emperor's carriage not far away and retreated. This matter did not look good, and it was better for them to stay away from the fire, lest they attract trouble. With them retreating, a large space was cleared. There were fewer people, but the atmosphere was not less oppressive. Gong Che walked towards Gong Dai, his footsteps calm, the whip hitting his palm again and again. He looked at Gong Dai with slightly curved lips, completely different from his usual self. Gong Dai, are you willing to be whipped by me to atone for your sins? Gong Dai felt that he was indulging in fantasy. Imperial Brother, don't you always say that you have a deep brotherly relationship with Imperial Brother? What? Such a small mistake, and you want to punish me? Isn't it too much? Gong Che smiled. A small mistake? As long as I am willing. You are guilty of great disrespect. This is not a small mistake. Gong Dai was too lazy to argue, and he sneered. If you want to touch me, you can try. As soon as he finished speaking, the rain seemed to have become heavier. However, no matter how heavy the rain was, it could not extinguish the rage and fury hidden in the silence. Gong Dai, I didn't realize it before, but now I feel that our personalities are quite similar. It's like you can't let go of the person you like, and so can I. You like your family, and so do I. We like the same person. In the heavy rain, his voice could only be heard by Gong Dai. Gong Dai raised his eyebrows slightly as he looked at the gentle but increasingly demonic face in front of him. Is that so? But I think it's different. If it's the same, why would royal sister like me and not you? His words were like the sharpest blade, causing Gong Chei's complexion to stiffen. In the next second, almost everyone present could feel the killing intent radiating from his body. Gong Chei's thin lips trembled. Finally, he raised his head and sneered. You probably don't know. A few days ago, Imperial Father really wanted to poison Immerse to death. Gong Dai's pupils shrank slightly. He knew about this, but at that time, he thought that the poison was just a normal poison that wouldn't kill. He didn't expect it to be a lethal poison. The Emperor, he could be so ruthless. He really wanted to kill Immerse. At that moment, Gong Dai was deeply wary of the Emperor. Gong Chei laughed. I was also very shocked when I found out about this. It seems that no matter who it is, in Imperial Father's eyes, they can't compare to the country. Just like me, although I'm the Crown Prince, I couldn't even break the engagement just now. Tell me, why couldn't I? Why couldn't he? It must be that the Emperor was afraid that if Gong Chei didn't marry, he wouldn't give up on Gong Yimo, so he forced him. However, this also pointed to a problem. The Emperor was still wary of Gong Yimo. Once he thought that she was harmful to the Daiyu state, he would definitely kill her without hesitation. As for Gong Yimo, that silly girl, she didn't guard against the Emperor at all. Moreover, she didn't allow Gong Dai to touch the Emperor. At this moment, she really put Gong Dai in a difficult position. Gong Chei looked behind Gong Dai at the Emperor's sedan that was silent in the rain and chuckled. Gong Dai, why do you think Imperial Father allowed so many of us to wait for you here? When I said that I wanted to use torture, he didn't say a word against it. Since the Emperor had already attacked Gong Chei today, he would treat everyone equally. He would also attack Gong Dai as a form of suppression and warning. If there was no reason, it would have been fine. However, Gong Dai had arrived late and gave the Emperor an excuse. Naturally, he was happy to use Gong Chei to punish Gong Dai and suppress his arrogance so that he would be more obedient in the future. Although they weren't too far away, due to the heavy rain, no one could clearly hear what they were saying. Even Chang, she could only hear a few words at most. He couldn't hear the specific content. So what do you think? Gong Chei allowed him to think for a moment before he asked unhurriedly, do you want me to beat you up to appease Imperial Father's anger, or do you want me to refuse and make Imperial Father even more wary of you, of Immerse? Gong Dai finally frowned. He was a little frustrated. What if I don't comply? In any case, the royal sister had already gone to Yuqi. Even if the Emperor was dissatisfied, he couldn't attack the royal sister. As if understanding Gong Dai's thoughts, Gong Chei took a step closer and lowered his voice. Do you know what Imperial Father said to me when I wanted to refuse the marriage? His voice was light, but it made Gong Dai even more wary. Gong Chei lowered his eyelids and whispered in Gong Dai's ear. Imperial Father said that if I don't comply, he will send people from Yuqi to poison Immerse. From what I know, Immerse, that silly girl, doesn't guard against people who are close to her, right? Gong Dai's eyes widened slightly. Looking at the rain, huge waves surged in his heart. He didn't expect that Gong Chung still hadn't given up on the idea of poisoning the royal sister. Are you very angry? Do you really want to overthrow him and kill him? Gong Chei smiled, but Imperial Father said that if he accidentally dies, he will drag Immerse down with him. Moreover, Immerse definitely won't allow you to touch Imperial Father. Tell me, what should we do? The rain poured down. Not only did it cut off the sound intermittently, it also made people's hearts beat wildly. In the end, the Crown Prince patted Gong Dai's shoulder as if they had already reached an agreement. Everyone couldn't help but feel suspicious. So now, are you willing to let me beat you up to appease Imperial Father's anger and not take it out on Immerse? Or do you want to continue to resist stubbornly? Gong Chei patted Gong Dai's shoulder and asked in the most gentle tone. Gong Dai felt Chang Shi's piercing gaze behind him, the Emperor's silent threat, and Gong Chei's provocation. The anger in his heart couldn't be suppressed. Were they forcing him to submit? Gong Che wanted to use this opportunity to humiliate him, while the emperor wanted to weaken him in front of everyone. Did he really think that he was easy to bully? Chapter 425. Gong Dai sneered, mocking them for overestimating their capabilities. Now that the royal sister had given him her virginity, as long as he wanted to, he could destroy all these people at any time. He wasn't prepared to do so, but he was afraid that the royal sister would be unhappy, because the last thing she wanted was internal strife, even if he didn't use his virginity. And if he used his virginity to kill people, the royal sister would probably ignore him for the rest of his life. He had two options now. One was to resist. While he was in the palace, he could directly use the imperial army to rebel. As for the second option, it would be a battle. After all, he didn't have a legitimate status, so there would definitely be a lot of people looking for trouble with the slogan of protecting the emperor. The Dayu state would then fall into internal strife, even though he was confident that he could quell the chaos within 2 years. The other option was much simpler, and that was to endure. After receiving the whipping, he would ask for permission to build roads. At that time, what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. To endure or not to endure. For the first time, Gong Dai felt that enduring was so disgusting. If it didn't have anything to do with the royal sister, he wouldn't have thought of enduring. But it did have something to do with her. Gong Dai frowned and pursed his lips. It seemed like a long time had passed, but it was actually only a moment. The emperor asked Chang Shi in the sedan, "How was it? Did you hit him?" Although the emperor's words didn't reveal his emotions, Chang Shi knew that the emperor was dissatisfied. Originally, the emperor didn't have to go through so much trouble to punish or suppress anyone, but the target was Gong Dai. Today, the emperor allowed Gong Che to cause trouble for Gong Dai. It was a test. If Gong Dai really resisted, the consequences would be disastrous. Just as Chang Shi was about to say that Gong Dai hadn't given in, Gong Dai knelt down on one knee. Whenever he thought of what Gong Yimo said to him before she left, his heart couldn't help but soften. At that time, she hugged him and kissed him fiercely. She also told him that she would solve this problem and that she would be with him. Therefore, Gong Dai closed his eyes in the heavy rain. Since Imperial Brother insists, then let's fight. When he knelt, the first one to be stunned was Gong Che. He thought that with Gong Dai's character, he wouldn't give in so easily, but he didn't expect him to give in so quickly. Thinking of this, Gong Che could not help but feel bitter in his heart. Immerse was really a seductress. He and Gong Dai would rather give in and put her in the slightest bit of danger. If you want to hit me, then hit me. That's easy for you to say. Gong Che gradually sneered and walked behind Gong Dai. He tightened his grip on the whip and looked at Gong Dai with an unconcealable killing intent. Since Ninth Brother is apologizing so sincerely, I will be gentler. As he said this, the whip in his hand fiercely fell down. With a paw sound, the onlookers couldn't help but tremble and turn their heads away. They were all afraid of Gong Dai in their hearts. Who knew that after seeing him in such a miserable state today, would he take revenge tomorrow? Gong Che used all his strength this time and directly hit Gong Dai until his flesh was split open. But Gong Dai clenched his teeth and didn't make a sound, as if he couldn't feel the pain. The rain flowed down his back and fell to the ground with the color of blood. Gong Che held the whip with a smile on his face. "Gong Dai, I punish you. Do you admit to your crimes?" Gong Dai closed his eyes and suppressed his emotions for a while before softly asking, "I admit it. Very good." Gong Che smiled and once again struck Gong Dai's back with the whip. The strength used this time was the same as the previous time. The sound traveled very far, and the onlookers couldn't help but retreat further, wishing that they hadn't come today. Gong Dai took a deep breath and kept his eyes closed. He frowned and didn't make a sound. Gong Che raised the whip and coldly looked at the crisscrossing bloody marks on Gong Dai's back. "This whip is to congratulate you for finally receiving Immerse's approval." He sneered, but no one knew how much pain his heart was in. Even if he were to whip this person in front of everyone, it wouldn't make him feel any better. Gong Dai knew about Gong Che running away from the marriage to meet the royal sister, but he didn't expect that the royal sister would admit to liking him in front of Gong Che in order to force Gong Che to back off. Thinking of this, Gong Dai's lips curled up and the gloomy feeling in his heart disappeared. He felt that this humiliation was nothing. Pa! Gong Che didn't give him a chance to breathe and struck again with the whip. This whip is to tell you that I won't give in again. So what if Emoa likes you? One day, she will return to my side. Gong, he opened his eyes and told him with a smile with his back facing him. You won't have a chance. She's my woman. What answered Gong Dai was a whip that was heavier than any of the previous ones. His entire body trembled, but he gritted his teeth and endured it. Your woman? Under his wet hair, Gong Che's eyes were red as he stared at Gong Ju's bloody back with a grim smile. His black clothes weren't very obvious, but there was a pool of blood on the ground. You must be very happy, right? Gong Dai was just about to answer when Gong Che's whip came down again. Gong Dai pursed his lips, and the veins on his neck popped out. Gong Che didn't need him to answer. He only wanted to teach Gong Dai a lesson. You must be very proud. Both of you have liked her for so many years. Both of you are family, but she likes you. Pa! Another lash, but Gong Che didn't look happy. His eyes turned redder and redder. She's wholehearted towards you, and her heart is moved. Towards me, she is good to me because I'm her brother. I'm not her brother. I'm not. Pa! Gong Dai's lips were pale and trembling, but he couldn't help but sneer when he heard this. So, you will always be defeated by me. His words almost caused Gong Che, who had been pushed to the edge, to break down. He lashed Gong Dai fiercely and questioned him loudly. Why? How are you better than me? Why is it that she always rejects me? Clearly, I only want her to be good to me. I don't feel so bad. So painful. Do you know what she said to me today made me think that in that second, I was already dead. Pa! Gong Che lashed Gong Dai fiercely with a whip as he questioned him. Tell me, what did I do wrong? I always endured it and never dared to act rashly, afraid of bringing trouble to her. I love her so much. Why can't she give me a little of her love? I only need a little. Towards the end, his voice gradually became hoarse until it disappeared. His hand that was holding the whip was even trembling. Just a little would be enough. Why was this a delusion? Why? Gong Che glared fiercely at the person in front of him. His eyes gradually turned sour, and his throat was slightly choked. He hated the heavens for being unfair. Chapter 426. The sound of the rain was too loud. Even when Gong Che confessed his love for Gong Yimo in front of everyone, no one showed any surprise. They only looked in his direction with some fear. Gong Dai was really good at enduring such a heavy whipping punishment. If it was an ordinary person, they would have fainted long ago. However, he could not make a sound. Gong Che was a little scary. He was like a completely different person from his usual gentle and refined self. Usually, if the palace servants or officials made a mistake, Gong Che would turn a blind eye to it, as long as it did not violate his principles. However, right now, he was so ruthless that it seemed as if he wanted to kill Gong Dai directly. Finally, Gong Che slowly raised his whip. His expression had gradually calmed down. However, his empty eyes could no longer see anything. His face was full of rain, but perhaps his tears were also silently mixed in. He was a man, a crown prince, but he was actually in so much pain that he cried. From now on, you are my only enemy. Between you and me, it is destined that we will fight to the death. He coldly and slowly finished his words. The whip in his hand did not strike down. Instead, he loosened his grip, and the whip fell to the ground, splashing cold water. Then, he did not look at Gong Dai again and continued to walk forward. Once Gong Che left, everyone let out a sigh of relief. They were really afraid that Gong Che would really whip Gong Dai without caring about anything. At that time, if Gong Dai became angry, would they still be able to leave the palace alive? Sun Yaolon was frightened by Gong Che's action, so much so that when Gong Che walked past her, she subconsciously stepped back and made way for him. After Gong Che walked past without looking sideways, she let out a sigh of relief. After letting out a sigh of relief, she slightly frowned because she suddenly realized that she might have underestimated Gong Che too much. He was not a handsome and elegant young master, but he gave off a feeling of an Azura from hell. The coldness exuding from his body made everyone retreat 3 feet away, not daring to get close. The Emperor's sedan chair also moved, but when it passed by Gong Dai, it stopped. Those officials very cleverly followed Gong Che. It was clear that the Emperor had something to say to the Prince of Qi. If they did not leave, they would be lacking in judgment. Very quickly, the place quieted down, but Gong Dai was still kneeling on one knee. The curtain of the carriage was lifted. Gong Chung coldly looked at his 9th son, who was kneeling in the rain. Gong Dai was in a very difficult situation at this time. This made Gong Chung dissatisfied, but in the end, he could only sigh. Gong Dai, you should know what happened when you were young, right? You should know why I banished you to the cold palace. His voice wasn't loud, but it was cold and aloof. But he knew that Gong Dai could hear him. Sure enough, Gong Dai moved and slowly stood up. At this time, Bai Sheng, who was following him, dared to step forward and take off his coat to give to the prince. Gong Dai was not picky and directly put it on. He slowly turned around and looked at the Emperor. I know that Imperial Father hates the house and its crow, because his Imperial Mother poisoned Imperial concubine Shui. The Emperor, who lost his beloved, did not like him. When Gong Chung saw Gong Dai's pale face and messy hair, the last bit of anger in his heart dissipated little by little, leaving only helplessness. Isn't that so? Hating the house, hating its crow. However, I have always admired you. Back then, you were so young. You were only 7 years old, but you were able to overcome all obstacles and kill your way to me, begging me to save Immerse. It was also raining that day, right? But you stood there like a sword. Our first reaction was to be intimidated by your arrogance. Gong Dai didn't answer, so Gong Chung continued. At that time, I felt that your hostility was too strong and wanted to suppress you. But before I could say anything, you knelt down and kowtowed again and again, as if you didn't want to live. Now that I think about it, it seems that at that time, Immerse, it was your only weakness. I didn't expect that now. It's your tribulation. Are you really unwilling to let it go? Let her go. You can get more. Tribulation? Standing beside the palanquin, Gong Dai suddenly raised his head. His face was covered with thin strands of hair, making his face look even whiter and his eyes even colder. At this time, he was looking at the Emperor without blinking. Imperial Father, you should rejoice. Oh, being stared at by him, Gong Chung frowned and didn't know why he responded. Gong Dai's thin lips slightly hooked up. Then he seriously told him, I and Royal Sister are different. She doesn't hate. She doesn't blame. She puts herself in the position of others and considers their difficulties. Basically, if people don't offend her, she won't offend them. But I'm different. Gong Ching's expression turned solemn. On the other side, Gong Dai smiled cruelly. He stared at the Emperor and whispered, If it weren't for her when I came out of the cold palace, everyone in the palace would be my enemy. His words shocked Changshi. Changshi quickly looked at the Emperor's face, only to see the Emperor's serious expression. It seems that he already knew his temperament. He will really do this. Gong Dai continued, If it weren't for her, do you think Lu Xianfei can live until now? Can the Empress sit still? Can Dai State be so quiet? He covered his mouth and laughed. It was obviously a feminine action, but at this time, he was full of murderous intent. You should thank Royal Sister. If it weren't for my love for her, I wouldn't have let go of my hatred. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't have suppressed my desire to kill. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't have endured. I am an abandoned rotten life. Without her, even if the sky is pierced, even if the people have no way to live, so what if I am happy? He said the last few words in a heavy tone, making Gong Cheng's heart sink. Gong Dai admitted that he liked Immerse, and it was no less than what Gong Che showed. Gong Cheng thought he would be angry, but he didn't expect him to be so calm at this moment. The only thing he felt was a headache. Gong Dai's murderous intent was too strong. His indifference was all an act. He couldn't be too ruthless to him like he was to Gong Che, because Gong Che still cared about the Empress and the Liu family, but Gong Dai didn't care about anyone. He was old, and his two sons had grown up. If he let it go, sooner or later, something big will happen. At this time, Gong Cheng regretted that he was soft-hearted and didn't let him or drink that bowl of soup. Seeing Gong Cheng's frown, Gong Dai smiled casually. Now, Imperial Brother seems to have a big opinion of me. I don't want to compete with him in the capital, because Royal Sister will be unhappy. But if he forces me again, even if I care about Royal Sister, I'm afraid I can't help but fight back. This was a threat. Today's matter was to vent the Emperor's anger, because a few days ago, he did a lot of things that angered the Emperor, but it was impossible for him to endure it all the time. Gong Chung frowned and said, "Then what do you want? I'm not dead yet." Chapter 427. As long as he is still alive, Daiyu State cannot fall into chaos. At this time, the rain has gradually subsided, but the cold air has not dissipated. Gong Dai looks at the sky and says softly, "I think Royal Sister is afraid that I can't control myself, so she wants me to replace her to repair the road. What do you think, Imperial Father?" Emperor Cheng is in a difficult position. If he sends Gong Dai out, it'll be more difficult for him to get Gong Dai married. But if he stays in the capital, there will be a lot of conflicts between his two sons. Finally, Emperor Cheng sighs. "Let's talk about this later. Let's go to the banquet first." Gong Dai smiles coldly. "No, Imperial Father. This son is seriously injured. I'm afraid I can't attend the banquet. Imperial Father, please apologize to Imperial Brother on behalf of this son." After saying that, he actually didn't care about how Gong Cheng would react. He directly turned around and left. "Chang," she asked in disagreement, "Your Majesty, do you want this servant to stop him?" Emperor Cheng closes his eyes and sneers. "Why? I'm afraid this Imperial Father is useless in his eyes." Changshi frowns. He is more and more dissatisfied with Gong Dai. The Emperor sighs. "I'm old, and my children are all grown up. I want to solve this matter, but I have a feeling that I can't intervene. I'm afraid it's fine if I'm alive, but once I'm dead, who in Daiyu State can suppress them?" The more he says, the more his head hurts. Emperor Cheng simply closes his eyes and starts to rest. The sedan chair moves again, heading towards the East Palace. Changshi looks at the curtain, but he doesn't say a word. He always felt that it is not a wise decision for the Emperor to send the princess away at this time, because as long as the princess is here, Daiyu State will not fall into chaos. But he doesn't dare to say this. On the other side, Gong Yimo sees that the rain has stopped, so she continues to hurry up north. After a while, the simple bag on her back moves, but it quickly quiets down. Obviously, the little monkey inside just turned over. Gong Yimo sighs. This guy is wild and hard to tame. She can only bring it with her. In any case, it has a tenacious vitality. No matter how she tosses it, it will sleep well. Gong Yimo takes a sip of water and accidentally touches the wound on her mouth. She gasps. Gong Che bit her so hard. She touches her lips. She's suppressing the uneasiness in her heart. She doesn't want to think about it. Anyway, as long as Gong Ju listened to her, you wouldn't be in a mess. She was already outside, and it was useless to think too much about it. It was better to go to Yuchi as soon as possible and solve the problem as soon as possible. With this thought in mind, she began to travel day and night. Finally, she arrived at the border city in the northeast of Daiyu, Zhao City. Yuchi was currently located in the northeast, and as long as she passed through Zhao City, she would be able to reach the Yuchi kingdom. The journey was a bit dusty, so Gong Yimo decided to take a good rest in Zhao City before going to Yuchi. Gong Yimo has never seen the governor of this place, but she can feel that he is not a very capable person. Zhao is rich in resources. There are grasslands, wetlands, and fertile soil. The four seasons are distinct. Zhao City, on the other hand, was very backward. Compared to the capital, It was like heaven and earth. The citizens are listless. The streets are filled with a gloomy atmosphere. After Gong Yimo enters the city, she doesn't have the desire to buy anything. At this moment, the sound of hurried horse hooves could be heard. Many peddlers quickly packed up their stalls. Their actions seemed to have been rehearsed thousands of times. The people on the street immediately fled, as if they were some kind of plague that was coming from afar. Gong Yimo also stepped aside. The journey was more important, and she didn't want to cause any trouble. Soon, a group of people whizzes past. They're all wearing armor, but they don't look like city guards. Instead, they look like mountain bandits. They don't care about the hawkers and pedestrians who didn't have time to hide. They galloped all the way, causing the streets to be in chaos. Gong Yimo looks on coldly. She doesn't do anything, but the group of people suddenly stopped when they brushed past her. The leader reins his horse and turns around. He looks at Gong Yimo and points his whip at her. "Come here." It is a bearded man. He is sitting on a tall horse. His eyes are full of arrogance. Gong Yimo sighed when she saw that many citizens who didn't have time to hide were cowering on the sides of the road. Then, she slowly walks forward. "Sir, what's the matter?" Her face is covered with a veil. This person shouldn't recognize her. "Take off your veil." The bearded man ordered again. Moreover, the others are also on their horses, eyeing her covetously. Gong Yimo is stunned, but she still takes off her veil. However, as soon as she took off her veil, most of the people on the opposite side of the horse revealed a lewd smile. The man in the lead stroked his beard and looked at Gong Yimo as if she were a commodity. His mouth laughed. "This young master has a discerning eye. I knew it was a beauty with one glance. I didn't expect it to be such a beautiful woman." Once he finished speaking, the people below quickly complimented. "Lord Bai has a discerning eye. You can recognize a woman just by smelling her." That's true. Who doesn't know that more than half of the beautiful women in the governor's residence are found by Lord Bai? It's rare that the governor thinks so highly of you. That Lord Bai snorts. "Enough. Take her away." His meaning is clear. Are they trying to kidnap a woman on the street? Gong Yimo touches her face. She didn't expect that she would experience the pain of being beautiful. "Lord Bai, I don't seem to have agreed to it." Gong Yimo sees two people coming down from their horses to catch her. Gong Yimo raises her eyebrows slightly and says, Bai Chio, who is already prepared to leave, pauses. He didn't expect that this little woman in front of him would dare to resist. Thus, he raises his eyebrows and says, "What do you want?" That expression, not only does he view women as fleeting clouds, but there is also a trace of contempt from his bones, as if it is her fortune that he chose her. "What do I want?" Gong Yimo is amused by him. "You want to take me away? Shouldn't you ask if I am willing?" Bai Chio frowns and snorts. "Aren't you women all the same? Climbing up to wealth and splendor, fickle at the sight of strange things. This young master is now giving you a chance to rise to the top. What else do you have to say?" Gong Yimo is so angry that she laughs. "You used to do this in the past. Did those women also agree to it?" Bai Chio ponders. "So what if there are women who don't agree? As long as he takes her body, treats her family better, and coaxes them with gold, silver, and jewels, won't they all obediently stay in the governor's residence? Thus, he can't be bothered to talk nonsense. Take her away." This time, Gong Yimo doesn't resist. She also wants to see what kind of person this governor of Zhao City is. He even dares to kidnap her. "Stop, don't touch me. I have my own horse. I will go with you." Seeing that Gong Yimo is so sensible, Bai Chio doesn't say anything. Instead, he sneered. Perhaps in his heart, he is even more certain that all women are the same. Thus, he directly urges his horse to leave, and Gong Yimo really follows behind him obediently and goes to the governor's residence. Chapter 428. The closer they got to the governor's residence, the more luxurious the houses became. However, Gong Yimo's eyes were cold. This luxurious house was not something a remote city like Zhao City could afford. She wondered how many people's wealth had been plundered. When they arrived at the governor's residence, Bai Chio personally brought Gong Yimo to see the governor. Obviously, he was eager to claim credit. It was a large courtyard, and as soon as Gong Yi entered, she smelled the fragrance of a woman's cosmetics. Gong Emo frowned as she watched the man in front of her lead her to the backyard. Obviously, this was not the first time he had done this. Finally, Gong Emo saw the legendary governor, Hize, among the women. Hize looked feminine, while the local men were more boorish. Obviously, Hize was not a local of Zhao City. The moment he saw Gong Emo, he pushed away all the women around him and walked towards her in a daze. "Chio, where did you get this beauty from?" "Beautiful. She's too beautiful." He reached out to touch Gong Emo's face, but was avoided by Gong Emo. Hize raised his eyebrows. Bai Chio said, "Sir, I have something important to report." Hize's eyes stared straight at Gong Emo. Nothing is more important than this official's enjoyment of women. Bai Chio frowned and blocked in front of Gong Emo. "Sir, it's also something related to women." Bai Chio was originally displeased with Hize's presence. However, Hize became interested after hearing what he said. "What's the matter?" Bai Chio said, "The capital's Grand Princess Fenggerong is coming. According to the princess's ceremonial entourage, she will be here in about a month." Gong Emo's name was well known even in the border city. Hize retracted his gaze from Gong Emo and frowned. What is she here for? However, he thought of something and smiled wickedly. "I wonder if this Grand Princess Gu is beautiful. I heard that she will be leaving Zhao City for Yuchi." After thinking for a while, Bai Chio continued. "Furthermore, the first princess is very beautiful. She's even more beautiful than the woman behind me." Hize was overjoyed when he heard this. "Is this princess sick? She doesn't know how to enjoy the splendor and wealth. She wants to go to Yuchi. Does she have a death wish? But if she is really that beautiful, perhaps I can become the prince consort. I wonder how the princess tastes." Bai Chio laughed inwardly at his ignorance of the immensity of heaven and earth, but he said solemnly, "Your Excellency, you should give up on this idea. I heard that the first princess of Gu State is deeply loved by the emperor. She is upright and likes to meddle in other people's business. If she sees the desolate city and the prosperous governor's mansion, I'm afraid she will complain to the emperor." Only then did Hize become serious. Complain? Thinking about how he had been desperately raising taxes for the past few years, he became a little scared. "This first princess wouldn't be so nosy, right?" Bai Chio said without changing his expression. "I heard that he abhors evil as if it were his enemy, and he especially hates corrupt officials. What should we do then?" Hize was a little anxious. He was the legitimate son of the capital's clan. Because he had offended someone, he was sent to this damned place for 10 years. It was not easy for him to live a comfortable life, but the capital sent a princess here. If it was someone else, it would be fine to bribe them. But for a princess, how could he bribe a man? Gong Emo looked coldly at Bai Chio's nonsense. Abhors evil as if it were his enemy? Meddles in other people's business? Why didn't she know that she had such a temper? Seeing that Hize was anxious, Bai Chio sneered in his heart. "It's not that there is no solution, but I don't know if your excellency is willing to do it." When Hize heard this, he quickly said, "Quickly say it. What's the solution?" Bai Chio pretended to think for a moment before saying, "Now that the taxes in the city are strict, everyone is complaining. When the first princess sees it, she will definitely not be happy. But your excellency, before the first princess comes, you can request for an imperial decree to exempt all taxes. This document will take exactly 1 month. When the first princess comes and sees the document, you can say that the governor's mansion is so luxurious because the people are deeply grateful and specially renovated it for you, and not because of plundering this." Hize was not happy. "Is this feasible? Why not?" Bai Chio took a step forward and said, "This is just for show. However, the Gu country's first princess doesn't look easy to fool. That's why we need evidence like a document. However, she's gone, and you continue to collect taxes. Who can control you?" Gong Emo slightly raised her eyebrows. "You can't say it like that. Although the taxes in Zhao City were high, there was still a reason. But once the document says that he will no longer collect taxes, Then when he collects taxes again in the future, it will be a serious crime. This Baichio seems like he wants to harm people, but she was happy to watch the show. Let's wait and see. Ize was still hesitating, but Baichio had already stepped aside. He pointed at Gong Yimo and said, "This matter cannot be delayed, or else the document will not be sent before the first princess arrives. Seeing that I have found you such a beauty, please bear with it for this period of time." The moment Baichio stepped aside, Ize looked at Gong Yimo and nodded repeatedly. He probably did not know what he had agreed to. Gong Yimo smiled. She did not expect that she had the ability to bring disaster to the country and the people. Baichio saw Ize's anxious look and could not help but say, "Then I will ask the left advisor to draft the document. But what if he doesn't believe that this is your order?" Ize hurriedly pulled out a waste token and gave it to him. Go. Don't get in his way." Baichio received the waste token and left excitedly. Before he left, he looked at Gong Yimo with contempt. Seeing that she did not cry or make a fuss, he despised her in his heart. Enjoy this last bit of prosperity. This Ize, I'm afraid that he will not live for long. Thinking of this, he smiled and walked out. He seemed to be very proud. The women in the courtyard were staring at Gong Yimo covetously. They felt that she was their biggest threat. Gong Yimo glanced at them, and finally her eyes fell on Ize. At this moment, Baichio had already walked out. Ize impatiently rushed over, but Gong Yimo reached out and pressed a gold medal against his forehead. Ize impatiently pushed her hand away, but he could not move it. He then looked at what she was holding in her hand. It would have been better if he did not see it. Once he saw it, he was so scared that his legs went soft, and he knelt down with a plop. That gold medal was actually written with the words, "As if I am here in person." In an instant, all of his anxiousness disappeared. He cursed Baichio 180 times in his heart, but it was obvious that Baichio did not know this woman's identity. Otherwise, he would not have brought her here. Your Excellency, this humble subject did not know that Your Excellency had arrived. May I know Your Excellency's identity? Ize's face was pale as he asked in a trembling voice. My identity? Gong Yimo finally spoke. This was the first time she had spoken since she came in. She smiled lightly and said indifferently, "I am the princess that you wanted to marry just now, Fongue Ranji." Chapter 429. That one sentence made Ize look as if his father had died. What was Baichio doing? Didn't he say that the princess would only arrive in a month? No, Baichio probably didn't know that she was a princess. Then was there a need for him to exempt the taxes? Half of the taxes had to be paid to the various levels before entering the national treasury. Zhao City was bitterly cold, so the emperor wouldn't care about the last bit of money. He would definitely allow it, but when the document was issued, he would be starving. He wanted to use the document to pretend to be an honest official, but now that the princess was here, there was no need for him to pretend. No, he had to call Baichio back. But right now, he had to coax the princess in front of him. He ruthlessly slapped himself in the face. "Princess," he begged, "it was me who didn't recognize Mount Tai. It was me who spoke nonsense. Please be magnanimous and don't be calculative with me." At this moment, the women in the backyard were scared silly. They stared at Gong Yimo, thinking that she was here to fight for favor, but they didn't expect her to be a princess. Gong Yimo sat on the chair that Ize was sitting on, crossed her legs, and asked lazily, "You wanted to have a taste of me before. Do you want to have a taste now?" She squinted her eyes when she said this, and her charming face was as dazzling as the sun above her head. Ize looked at her and swallowed hard, but his remaining consciousness made him slap himself again, and he said with a sad face, "How would I dare? Please forgive me, princess, and forgive me." Gong Yimo casually picked up a piece of snack and slowly ate it. "Are you in a hurry now?" "What's the hurry?" Gong Yimo blinked. "You're in a hurry to stop Baichio, but I think it's useless. With Baichio's speed, it won't take long for the document to be sent out." At that moment, Ize's face turned even uglier. His face turned green and white, and his heart was burning with anxiety. He suddenly fell silent and glanced at Gong Yimo, and his heart fell into a crazy struggle. After a while, he asked in a low voice, "Why don't I see the princess's retinue?" Gong Yimo smiled. "Of course there's no retinue. You came alone?" He, who was kneeling on the ground, asked carefully. Gong Yimo nodded. "Yes, I'm alone." There seemed to be some restlessness in the air. After a while, He steeled his heart and stood up on his own. He stared at Gong Yimo and rolled his eyes. He guessed that what Gong Yimo said must be true. Otherwise, Baichio would not be so muddle-headed as to capture her. "If that's the case, what is the purpose of your visit, princess?" Gong Yimo shook her head. "Just now, on the way here, I saw that the people in Zhaocheng were living in poverty while your prefect manor was luxurious and extravagant. I couldn't stand it and wanted to tell on you to Imperial Father." At this moment, even someone as timid as He had an ominous glint in his eyes. "Since that's the case, Princess might as well stay as a guest. Since Yu Qi is in danger, you can't blame me for your sudden disappearance." Men. As soon as he gave the order, many people ran in, scaring away the women in the courtyard, leaving only Gong Yimo. "Arrest her for this official." He was hesitant, but still did as he was told. He had thought it through well. After capturing her, he would send someone to impersonate her. When someone asked, he would insist that the princess went missing in Yu Qi. The most important thing now was to stop Baichio. At that time, he wouldn't need to submit any documents and could even get a beauty for free. He really couldn't wait to have a taste of the princess. Seeing the people approaching, Gong Yimo said calmly, "I'm not happy with you being like this." He laughed. "You can say this on the bed." As he said that, those people pounced forward. But Gong Yimo casually kicked a few times and sent those people flying. She didn't even leave the chair. This kind of martial arts was not something that those good-for-nothings in the border town could resist. He never thought that Gong Yimo's martial arts were so powerful. He looked fierce and sent more than 400 of the 500 guards in Zhaocheng to capture Gong Yimo. The entire backyard of the governor's mansion was packed to the brim. He anxiously watched from the side, thinking that no matter how powerful Gong Yimo was, he had more than 400 people. It was impossible that they couldn't catch her, right? The commotion here alarmed Baichio. He had already sent out the documents, but suddenly heard that almost all the city's military forces had gone to the administration office. He quickly followed to find out what was going on. But when he arrived, everything had already been settled. Baichio walked in, and the more he walked, the more shocked he was. The floor was filled with guards who were beaten until they couldn't get up. Usually, they were the accomplices of the villain and were all arrogant. But now, they were lying on the floor and didn't even have the strength to move. What kind of monster was this? This was the sentence that was crazily spammed in He's heart. How could a princess in the inner court be so powerful? More than 400 people. More than 400 people were not a match for her. He watched helplessly as Gong Yimo handled those people with ease. He was so scared that he knelt on the floor to repent and let Gong Yimo step on his back. At this time, Gong Yimo was sitting on a special rattan chair that he had brought over from outside the region. She was eating the delicious wine and pastries that were sent over from the neighboring city. Below her were her own people. Although He wasn't injured, he wasn't in a good state. He was trembling and lying on the floor under Gong Yimo's feet like a servant. When Baichio came in, he saw this scene. His first reaction was that this woman was a martial arts expert. His second reaction was that this woman was extremely daring. He's father was a second-grade official in the capital. It was said that he had sought refuge with the Prince of Qi and was doing well in the capital. Offending He's, this woman probably wouldn't have a good ending. But he was the one who found this woman. He's probably wouldn't let him go. This was a bit of a headache. So he rushed in and roared, "Who are you? Why aren't you letting go of official He?" He's was just about to speak when Gong Yimo stepped on him. She smiled at Baichio. "He's just an ant. So what if I don't let him go?" Baichio sneered. "Country girls don't know what's good for them. Do you know who he is?" Gong Yimo blinked. "Who?" It seemed that she was really ignorant and fearless. Baichio pointed at He's and sneered. "Have you heard of the Prince of Qi?" The Prince of Qi has an assistant who is a second-grade official in the capital. Official, he is his second son. Gong Yimo touched her chin. So, Bai Chio frowned with displeasure. So you better let go of official he. Otherwise, if you alarm his father, I'm afraid that your family will be implicated by you. His words were threatening, and it wasn't baseless. In the past, Heizei really did have a political enemy. Later, that person was dealt with by the He family and retired early. Otherwise, Zhao City wouldn't have become like this, where Heizei had the final say. Chapter 430. Gong Yimo closed her eyes. What if I don't release him? Bai Chio sneered. Then you can wait for your family to be exterminated. If you still don't realize your error and alarm the prince, perhaps you could try the 18 kinds of torture in Zhao prison. Gong Yimo was angered by his words. She had never been to Gongdai Zhao prison because she deeply experienced that place and was traumatized, especially when she looked at the person under her feet. He seemed to be hoping for a fluke because he knew that Gu country's princess was on good terms with Prince Qi. Perhaps she would let him go because of this? Seeing her silence, Bai Chio threatened. Are you afraid now? Since you know, why don't you let official he go? Let him go? Because she was afraid of Gong Dai? Gong Yimo laughed and shook her head, but her laughter was a little cruel. Not to mention him. Even if it was his father, he accent, as long as I want, Gong Dai will also pluck his head for me to play with. Her words made Bai Chio shocked. In this world, the only person who dared to call the prince by his name, other than the emperor and the crown prince, was that legendary princess. But that person was a princess. How could she be alone? Thus, he frowned and asked cautiously, You dare to ask about your identity? Bai Chio became serious. Gong Yimo smiled brightly and sighed as she looked at the sky. It's not a great identity, but Gong Dai has to call me royal sister. Tell me, who am I? She curiously looked at Bai Chio's face, and, as expected, his face suddenly turned ashen, but he still didn't believe that this person was a princess. At this moment, Heizei finally gave up and shouted, Kneel down. She's the eldest princess of Gu country, holding the golden token arrow. She's like the emperor himself. Bai Chio was shocked and knelt down with a thump, his eyes filled with disbelief. Princess? How could he grab a princess so casually? Seeing him like this, Gong Yimo laughed, her voice clear and moving. She glanced at him and asked proudly, How is it, Big Beard? Are you surprised and surprised? Alarm bells rang in Bai Chio's heart. Since ancient times, women were hard to deal with. Even if the person in front of him was a princess, he was afraid that she was a narrow-minded woman. Now, he had fallen into the hands of this woman before he could even get his revenge. Was he really suffering retribution for all the evil he had done? This humble subject didn't know that the princess had arrived. I beg for the princess forgiveness. Bai Chio thought for a while and decided to apologize first. His forehead was covered in cold sweat, and he kept thinking about how to get away. Oh! Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows and tapped the coffee table beside her. What if I don't forgive you? Her words made Bai Chio's heart turn cold. He knew that women were the most difficult to deal with and the most unwilling to give up. He was already prejudiced against women. Seeing that Gong Yimo was not willing to let him go, he propped himself up and said coldly, If you want to kill me or torture me, do as you please. When Gong Yimo saw this, she was amused. He was a tough nut to crack. She directly threw a dagger in front of Bai Chio. Here, pick it up. Gong Yimo's voice came, but Bai Chio did not move. Could it be that this princess wanted him to commit suicide? Seeing that he did not move, Gong Yimo raised her hand and stared at her fingertips. She said faintly, Didn't you say that you can kill me or torture me? Why don't you pick it up? Heizei, who was kneeling at his feet, was already scared out of his wits. It seemed that this princess was a woman who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. He did not know how she would deal with him later. He scolded Bai Chio 1,000 times in his heart, but he was thinking of a way out for himself. Bai Chio was a little angry when he heard this. He picked up the dagger, but he thought in his heart, Why should he listen to this woman? Could a princess force someone to commit suicide? Being stared at by his angry eyes, Gong Yimo slowly lay back and ordered, I don't need you to torture yourself. Let's play a game. Bai Qiu frowned. He did not know what medicine she was selling in her gourd. Gong Yimo looked at him with a smile. As long as you shave your face clean, if you look better than the one at my feet, I will let you go and deal with him. If you don't look as good as him, unfortunately, I will have to deal with you first. Her licentious words immediately made Bai Qiu feel disgusted. He felt humiliated for no reason. But now, the other party's martial arts skills were higher than his. Her status was higher than his. Even Hizhe was kneeling at her feet. What reason did he have to refuse? Even if he was full of anger. But when he picked up the dagger in his hand, he faintly looked at Gong Yimo. He did not want to be humiliated like this. On the contrary, Hizhe was more anxious. Hurry up and do it, Bai Qiu. This official orders you to do it quickly. Hizhe thought very well. This Bai Qiu was always outside and had a face full of beard. He must be very ugly and definitely could not be compared to him. When this princess went to deal with Bai Qiu, he would push all the responsibility to Bai Qiu and get himself out of trouble. Bai Qiu naturally knew what Hizhe was thinking. He looked at Gong Yimo and then looked at Hizhe. Suddenly, he changed his mind. Anyway, he wanted to deal with this man. Since he was so eager to court death, then he would give it a try. Bring me a mirror. Bai Qiu straightened his body and said to Gong Yimo in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Gong Yimo casually pointed at a frightened maidservant. You, bring me a mirror. That maidservant quickly followed the order. Because it was in the backyard, the mirror was quickly brought back. Gong Yimo simply let the maidservant hold the mirror and stand in front of Bai Qiu. Bai Qiu really used a sharp dagger to shave himself. During the waiting process, Gong Yimo was somewhat bored and kicked Hizhe. Tell me, how do you want me to deal with you? Hizhe was shocked. He looked at Bai Qiu and said loudly, Princess, all of this was Bai Qiu's own idea. He used this method to please me. It was not good for me to not give him face, so I accepted those beauties. This courtyard was also left behind by the previous governor. I was completely unaware of it. Gong Yimo looked at him, kneeling on the ground, and spoke with a sincere expression. She said absent-mindedly, In other words, you're innocent? Yes, yes. He nodded his head like he was pounding garlic. Gong Yimo smiled and pointed at the naked people on the ground. Then you're also innocent when you let them besiege me? Hizhe was shocked. Just when he wanted to say something, Gong Yimo impatiently interrupted him. All right, it doesn't matter even if you're innocent. If you don't look as good as that Bai Qiu, unfortunately, I will definitely punish you. Gong Yimo had some malicious thoughts. She did not promise that she would let him go if he was better looking than Bai Qiu. When Hizhe heard this, he quickly stared at Bai Qiu. At this moment, Bai Qiu seemed to have stopped his actions. The maidservant carried the mirror and retreated, revealing his face. He only heard his deep and cold voice say, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. When Hizhe saw his face, he suddenly became angry. Impossible, it was impossible for Bai Qiu to be so good-looking. Chapter 431. Gong Yimo was also shocked for a moment. Actually, she just wanted to tease this person, who asked him to have such a disdainful attitude towards women. She didn't expect that not only was he better looking than this Hizhe, but he was also better looking by more than just a little. At first glance, Bai Qiu looked like a very serious person. Even though he was good-looking and could be considered young, his slightly furrowed eyebrows and stern, handsome face gave people a feeling of maturity. The impatience between his eyebrows made it seem as if someone owed him millions of dollars. At this moment, when he saw Gong Yimo staring at him, his brows furrowed even tighter. It was as if being stared at by a woman was something that he couldn't accept. It was really an interesting and awkward personality. On the other side, Hizhe couldn't stay calm anymore. He stood up and pointed at Bai Qiu and shouted unwillingly, This is impossible. This is impossible. Bai Qiu was obviously a bearded man. How could he be better than him? Gong Yimo was amused by Hizhe's reaction. She narrowed her eyes and looked at him with some pity. She played the role of a lustful and absurd princess incisively and vividly. It seems that the result is very obvious. Lord He, right? I can only deal with you first. Hize was still resisting. He looked at Gong Yimo plaintively. Princess, this Baichio is a boorish man. Even if his appearance is better than mine, I guarantee that in bed, he won't be as considerate and gentle as me. Gong Yimo was eating pastries. She didn't have much reaction when she heard that. She glanced at him from head to toe. That gaze of hers was like looking at goods. Good skills? That's possible. It's just that your expression is superficial. One look, and I can tell that your body has been hollowed out by wine and women. I feel that your ability might be lacking. At this moment, Baichio couldn't listen to it anymore. He stood up and looked coldly at Gong Yimo. You're simply shameless. Could it be that this woman saw that he was handsome and wanted him to be her boy toy? On the other side, Hize quickly said, I have enough ability, enough. Please give me a chance. Please spare me. Gong Yimo touched her chin. Forget about the chance. I can spare you, but Hize looked at her with a face full of surprise. But you should go back to the capital now. Zhao City doesn't belong to you anymore. What? Hize stood rooted to the ground in shock. It took him a while to find his voice. No, you're just a princess. You have no right. Gong Yimo took out the gold medal and shook it. Back then, Gong Dai had returned the gold medal to her after taking it back from Shun Shiyi. She didn't expect it to be so handy. As if I'm here in person. I don't have this right, but does Imperial Father not? Gong Yimo said faintly. You also know the relationship between Gong Dai and me. You also know that your father makes a living under Gong Dai. I'm just removing your position. If you're unhappy and want to make a scene, ask your father to look for Gong Dai and let Gong Dai reason with me. But at that time, he would definitely be dealt with even more miserably. Gong Yimo looked at him with a smile. As for now, you can get lost. By the way, I heard that you have a private advisor with the surname Zhua. Seems like he's your confidant. Take him and scram back. This doesn't make sense. Hize's brain had completely shut down. Who could tell him if a princess really had such great power to remove him from his position? But Gong Yimo was already impatient. Are you leaving or not? If you're not leaving, do you want me to make a move? Hize seemed to have just woken up from a dream. Leave, I'll leave right now. As he said that, he made up his mind. He would bring his confidant back and ask his father to seek justice for him. He also wanted to lodge a complaint against her for abusing her power and interfering in political affairs. He didn't believe that the emperor would allow a princess to cause trouble like this. Seeing that Hize really left, Baichio still couldn't react. He had been in Zhao City for a year and spent so much effort to gain Hize's trust. He finally thought of a plan to get rid of Hize and the He family completely. He didn't expect that this unreasonable princess would mess things up so quickly. At that moment, Baichio's heart was empty. He was annoyed that Gong Yimo was meddling in other people's business, but he couldn't do anything about it. After Gong Yimo dealt with Hize, she looked at the person who was pretending to be dead on the ground. She got up and went to the front yard. When she passed by Baichio, she smiled maliciously at him. Baichio, right? Come with me. When she smiled, Baichio felt that she had bad intentions towards him. He was originally wary of her, but in an instant, it turned into disgust. Disgust was disgust, but the situation was pressing. Baichio still followed Gong Yimo to the front yard. When they arrived at a place that looked like a study, the servants in the yard were afraid of Gong Yimo and stayed far away. Gong Yimo didn't care and strode in. Baichio hesitated for a moment, but still went in. He wanted to see what this woman had up her sleeve. When he went in, Gong Yimo waved her hand and the door behind him was slammed shut. Baichio was shocked and quickly turned to open the door to leave. Gong Yimo laughed behind him. You're a man. Are you afraid that I'll rape you? Can you not be so cowardly? The word cowardly made Baichio's hand that was holding the door handle tightened. In the end, he suppressed his anger and turned around. He looked at Gong Yimo and said coldly, What orders does the princess have? Gong Yimo sat on a hollow wooden chair made of yellow rosewood. She put her feet on the desk and said casually, "I've dealt with him, but I haven't dealt with you yet. You snatched a woman on the street. Do you think that this matter will be settled just like that?" Baichio said, "What does the princess want?" Gong Yimo couldn't help but tease him when she saw his defensive appearance. "You're using your body to pay for your crime? Shameless." Baichio did not hesitate to reply to her with 4 words. Gong Yimo touched her nose and was a little embarrassed. Actually, she was just bored. This Baichio snatched a woman and didn't repent. She definitely wanted to torture him. However, seeing that he had the heart to get rid of evil for the people, she didn't mind giving him a chance to listen to the reason. If this Baichio wasn't a good person and harmed by Zay for his own selfish reasons, she didn't mind getting rid of evil again. "Tell me, why do you want to harm Bai Zay? Do you want to replace him?" Baichio sneered. He was tall and stood there like a big tree. He looked at Gong Yimo with disdain. At this moment, he had already determined that Gong Yimo was a perverted person. Of course, he didn't have a good tone. Just a governor of Zhaoqing. I don't care. What he yearned for was to fight on the battlefield and serve the country. He didn't want to fight and scheme in this small border town. Such big words. Gong Yimo laughed. "You're just a city guard leader. What's there to be arrogant about? Tell me, what grudge do you have with Zay? Why did you scheme to harm him? I'll give you a chance. You better tell me the truth." Chapter 432. Baichio didn't want to say it first, but Gong Yimo was someone with power and influence. If she really wanted to get to the bottom of it, he wouldn't be able to hide it from her. After a long silence, Baichio finally spoke. "I just can't stand the He family and wanted to help my father get rid of a pest in Zhao City." "What do you mean? Who's your father?" Gong Yimo's interest was piqued. "You better tell me the truth. Otherwise, when I make my move, there will be 2 possible outcomes for you." She was threatening him again. Baichio clenched his fists and frowned. He said coldly, "No need to threaten me. I'll tell you." He took a deep breath. "I, Baichio, am the son of Baiji, the garrison general of the border city." Gong Yimo was stunned. She asked curiously, "The Baiji you're talking about, is he the 3rd-ranked general guarding the border city?" Baichio found it hard to speak, but in the end he said, "Yes." He looked at the desk and seemed to recall the past. His expression was conflicted. "Back then, I was very young and my father was just a small soldier. It was tough living in a place like Zhao City. The woman who gave birth to me was very beautiful. In the end, she didn't want to suffer with my father, so she seduced the former governor of Zhao City and became his concubine. Since the former governor didn't have a son, she took me with her. After my father came back, he went to find trouble with the former governor in a fit of anger. In the end, he was seriously injured and couldn't even take me with him. In the end, he was disheartened and went back to the border city. It's also that woman's fault for being as blind as a bat. Later on, my father made great contributions and was promoted very quickly. That woman regretted following an old governor and went to the border to find my father. My father was originally unwilling to accept her, but for my sake, he agreed. But I didn't expect that all of this was a conspiracy by that rank 2 official Hexin. We talked about his mother. His tone was disgusted. He kept using that woman as a metaphor. When he talked about Hexin, it was pure hatred. Hexin is a 2nd-rank official and a close official in the capital. I don't know how that woman got together with Hexin. Anyway, Hexin wanted to get rid of my father, who had no foundation, for his son who would be the future governor of Zhao City. This way, not only will his son become the governor of Zhao City, but he will also be able to obtain the 50,000 soldiers that were originally stationed in Zhao City. Speaking of this, he smiled bitterly. I don't know what Hexin promised that woman, but she actually used me to secretly poison Father. Later, the conspiracy fell apart. Although Father didn't die, he became a mute. Father wanted to kill her, but she was taken away by Hexin and brought to the capital. Now, it's said that the first wife is dead, and she has been promoted to the first wife. Father was disheartened by that incident and never smiled again. Moreover, after Hizay took over, He was unwilling to deal with such rascals and directly left Zhao City to repair the border. However, because he was poisoned into a mute, even though the emperor pitied his father for his hard work, he would never have the chance to be promoted again. You will be a loyal subject for the rest of your life. And all of this was caused by the child that he was so proud of. Baichio said fiercely, "Father can swallow this, but I can't." So, I sneaked into Heizei's side and saw that he was an ignorant and incompetent child. So I wanted to use him to turn the He family upside down. I was about to succeed, but I didn't expect you to interfere. Speaking of this, he finally showed his resentment and looked angry. So, not only did he want Heizei to lose the governor's position, but he also wanted to bring disaster to the entire He family. No, perhaps this wasn't the main point. His main point was probably that he hoped that Bai Ji could return to Zhao City and not have to work so hard in the border fortress. Gong Yimo touched her chin and said innocently, "I didn't know. You wanted to catch me, so how can you blame me? If not?" Baichio still stubbornly asked. Gong Yimo shrugged her shoulders. Forget it. She was a great person who didn't hold a grudge against a villain. This was because she knew Baichio's father, Bai Ji, in her previous life. In her previous life, his father helped her, but she didn't know that he had a child. No matter what, the matter here is finished. Father will send a new governor over soon. Shouldn't you go back? Baichio's face showed his reluctance. Why? You don't want to go back to your father. Baichio looked at her and said in a low voice after a while, "I was young and inexperienced, so I begged Father to forgive that woman. But later on, that woman used me to poison Father. Even if Father didn't say anything in the end and endured it, he wouldn't blame me, but he couldn't endure it. Moreover, he swore that if he couldn't make the He family pay the price and make his father return to Zhao City, he wouldn't go back. So, he was a homeless child." Gong Yimo thought of the 50,000 soldier station outside Zhao City and stared at Baichio. Suddenly, she had an idea. "Since that's the case, you can follow me. I just happen to lack a waiter." Of course, Baichio wouldn't agree. "Dream on. So what if you're a princess? I, Baichio, will not be a woman's servant." Gong Yimo tilted her head. "Did you forget something? Only you can kidnap women, but I can't kidnap men. What should I do? Your crime is not small. If Bai Ji knew that you harmed so many women in order to gain Heizei's trust, he would be very sad." As she spoke, she waved the gold medal in her hand. "Moreover, Father said that my status is equivalent to the crown prince. If you don't satisfy me, I can only vent my anger on your father. Your father is so pitiful. He couldn't get promoted because of a woman and lost his position because of his own son. Are you threatening me?" For the first time, Baichio hated a woman so much. Gong Yimo said frankly, "Yes, I'm threatening you. If you don't follow me, I can't guarantee what I will do when I see your father after we pass the checkpoint. The emperor won't allow you to do that." Gong Yimo said indifferently, "Whatever. At most he'll scold me. But it's hard to say if your father will be reinstated." Gong Yimo, I didn't expect you to know my name." "Why me?" Baichio asked in annoyance. Wasn't his disgust obvious enough? He still had so many things to do. Who knew if that Heizei would come back again? Gong Yimo touched her chin and smiled. "You're good looking. Baichio, I'm going to scratch this face." Gong Yimo waved her hand. "Don't worry. I've seen many beauties in the palace. Gong Dai is even better than you. I'm used to eating big fish and big meat. I won't be interested in a small vegetable porridge like you." Baichio, who knows if she wants to change her taste? Anyway, under Gong Yimo's strong request, Baichio finally became her waiter. Gong Yimo sent a letter to Gong Dai, asking him to ask Father to send another trustworthy governor. Then, she listened to Baichio and temporarily appointed someone to take care of the affairs. Then, she continued with Baichio. Chapter 433. Gong Yimo did not intend to care about the matters in Zhao City. She had already given money to appease those women. Those who had families could go home, and those who did not could wait for the next governor to make arrangements. Anyway, She believed that as long as Gondai took this matter seriously, he would definitely do a good job. However, as long as it was something Gong Yimo said, which matter had Gondai not taken to heart. Baichio was a little unhappy along the way, especially when they were about to reach the garrison's boundary. In the past 10 years, the garrison and Zhao City had been completely separated. They did not interfere with each other. Now that he had accomplished nothing, he really did not want to go back. However, Gong Yimo did not care. She kept ordering him around. Anyway, he had done something bad, so she did not feel guilty at all when she ordered him around. At night, the two of them rested on the grass. Gong Yimo's standard of barbecuing was really quite low. She could not help but miss Gong Dai's cooking. Since she was young, Gong Dai's cooking was as if he was born to be good. It was especially to her taste. However, now that Gong Dai was not around, she could only put up with it. However, her expression was as if she had eaten poison, which seriously provoked Baichio. He could not wait to just leave. He really did not want to tolerate her. Seeing his ugly expression, Gong Yimo sighed. Baichio, your cooking is really amazing. She scratched her heart and lungs to think of an adjective that was not derogatory. At that moment, Baichio decided that he would definitely practice a superb cooking skill in the future to broaden this woman's horizons. After a while, Gong Yimo was bored and started ordering him around again. Although he had been gritting his teeth, he had never once disobeyed her. Therefore, Gong Yimo was even more energetic. If she wanted to drink water, he would go get it. If she wanted to rest, he would clean up and cook. However, if she could not sleep at night, it was too much to ask him to tell her a bedtime story. Baichio smashed the water bottle in his hand. He was not doing it. Gong Yimo did not look at him. She just looked at the sky and sighed faintly. What should I do? I can't sleep if I don't hear a bedtime story. If I can't sleep, I will be in a bad mood. I'm going to see Baichi tomorrow. Do you think I should vent my anger on him? Baichio stopped breathing deeply. His tall figure resolutely turned around and returned to the side of the fire again. What do you want to hear? His face was so dark that it could cure a child. But to see your father? In fact, very few people knew that Baichi had a son. After all, he had lived with his mother for a long time when he was young. But no matter what, Baichi treated him well and had high hopes for him. Then be quiet, he said angrily. Gong Yimo slept beside the fire. She put her hand behind her head and looked at the stars in the sky. Okay, I'll shut up. You tell me. Baichio took a deep breath and racked his brains. In the end, he told her a story about a butcher and a wolf. The general idea was that the butcher went home at night and met a wolf. The butcher was afraid that the wolf would attack him, so he held the butcher's knife in his hand and threw the bones in his pole to the wolf, hoping that the wolf would eat the meat and leave quickly. The original ending of the story was that the wolf was not satisfied, so the butcher planned to kill the wolf. But Baichio did not know why. The ending of the story was, the butcher was fooled by the wolf's illusion that it was full. He kept the butcher's knife in his hand and was bitten to death by the wolf. Gong Yimo frowned. This story is not logical. Under normal circumstances, the butcher fed the wolf so much meat and bones. The wolf was full and would not be so aggressive. Even if the butcher was relieved, he should not have kept the butcher's knife in his hand. Baichio glared at her. It was a story. Why did it need logic? He sneered. There are such stupid butchers in this world. They did not guard against the wolf and thought that the wolf would be full. They did not know that the wolf was greedy and would never be satisfied. Even if the wolf killed a person, it would not finish the person after achieving its goal. At most, it was an instinct to conquer the enemy that was a threat to itself. If a person believed in the wolf, only death would await them. Gong Yimo knew what he meant. He was saying that his father should not have trusted his mother so easily and was harmed by his mother. But Gong Yimo, she could not help but think of a pair of cold star-like eyes. She was not convinced. There are wolves that can be tamed. What the wolf becomes in the end, the environment it grew up in, is the absolute reason. People say that it is easy to change mountains and rivers, but it is hard to change one's nature. I think that nature is the easiest to change. It will change with time, status, and experience. It cannot be generalized. Baichio looked at her with a puzzled expression. Why are you so agitated? Do you want to be that stupid butcher too? He sneered, but when he saw that Gong Yimo did not say anything, he could not help but put on a serious face and said coldly, There's a saying in the book, at the beginning of man, his nature is good. I think that at the beginning of man, there is good and evil. The nature of evil, no matter how the environment changes, it will not defecate. Maybe it will hide its nature, but once the bottom line is crossed, it will definitely show its fangs. It is like someone once raised a wolf. It was raised since it was young, but it did not feed it for a day, and it killed the child in the family. So evil is evil. The nature of evil did not break out. Maybe it is because it has not been forced to a dead end, or it has not gotten what it wants. So it pretends to be harmless. Nonsense. Gong Yimo was panting with anger. She thought of Gong Dai and felt that although Gong Dai was cold-blooded and cruel in her previous life, he was much better in this life. In her previous life, although he killed her, he would not do it in this life. But what if it was just because she didn't touch his interests, didn't stand on the opposite side of him? So he wasn't forced into a dead end, or he hadn't conquered her yet, so he didn't show his fangs? Gong Yimo was bewitched. Once bitten, twice shy. The last painful memory of her previous life overlapped with the memory now. One moment, it was Gong Dai's cruel and evil smile. The next moment, it was Gong Dai's clear eyes. They were obviously the same person, but would they really become two completely different people? Scary. What was she thinking? Gong Yimo knocked on her head. She had already given her virginity to Gong Dai. Thinking of this, she glared at Baichio angrily. Just you wait. I will prove to you that there is no such thing as nature. Even if it is a wolf, it will become a good wolf. Baichio was baffled and simply did not want to bother with her. Gong Yimo turned over on the grass and made up her mind. Tomorrow, she would go to see Baiji. She wanted to use Baichio as a favor to get Baiji's support. Most importantly, she did not want to see this annoying person, Baichio, ever again. Chapter 434. Late at night, Prince Chi's residence was on fire. Gong Dai watched the flames rise. Especially in summer, the fire was unstoppable. It burned down 1/5 of the rooms, including the room where the royal sister used to live. His face was extremely gloomy as he watched the Imperial army go in and out to put out the fire. He stood at the edge of the fire, his face red and the depths of his eyes red. Your Highness! Lo Chi knelt beside him. The person who set the fire was caught and killed himself with poison. At this moment, Luo Xiaoqi also knelt down, reporting, Your Highness, many people have written to impeach you and urge the Emperor to take back your authority over the Imperial army. Should we intercept them? Reporting, Your Highness, a spy has appeared in the Imperial army camp and caused internal strife. Should we execute him on the spot? Reporting, Your Highness, the fire has been dug out. The fire won't spread any further. The fire was still raging. Even though they were kneeling there, they found it difficult to breathe, and their faces were burning. Gong Zhu's expression remained unchanged. He listened to the reports one after another and coldly said, Order everyone to come here and save this room. What about the other rooms? The prince's study was also on fire. Back then, in order to accompany the princess, the prince had deliberately moved to this corner and did not move away. The study was an important place. Did they not need to save it? Gong Dai closed his eyes to hide the hostility in them and said coldly, Let it burn. Lo Chi was nudged by Xiaoqi and stepped forward. Your Highness, putting out the fire is not the most important thing right now. There are still many people waiting for your orders. Gong Dai glanced at them. What did you just say? Everyone wanted to faint, but they had no choice but to grit their teeth and repeat it. Gong Dai's gaze moved away from the room where the royal sister used to live and fell on them. This prince knows the person who set the fire. There's no need to investigate. There's also no need to stop those who impeach this prince. Let them impeach. If possible, Let our people impeach this prince as well. As for the imperial army, this prince has his own arrangements. There's no need to worry. Lo Chi did not understand why their own people were also impeaching the prince. But he did not ask. He only gnashed his teeth and said, "Those impeachers usually received a lot of benefits from us, but now they changed sides." Gong Dai was silent. This was within his expectations. After all, except for his trusted officials, he had only used money to rope in the court officials. Because he had sworn that he would not become emperor, then it would be fine if he did not clash with the crown prince. Once he broke off relations with the crown prince, would those people help the future emperor or a prince who had sworn not to become emperor? Anyone could tell the difference between the pros and cons. Your Highness, since the crown prince is already bullying us, how should we fight back? According to the thoughts of the servants and the prince's usual style, he felt that if the prince made a move, the crown prince would definitely lose miserably. Unexpectedly, Gong Ju just shook his head. Wait a little longer. Wait for what? Someone asked subconsciously. Gong Dai watched as the fire gradually died down. His expression softened. Wait for the emperor's decision. He was afraid that if he stayed in the capital, he would wash the land with blood. Seeing that Gong Dai did not move, they all felt aggrieved. Lo Chi frowned. I don't know why the crown prince suddenly went crazy. He has been causing trouble for us recently. A few days ago, the riot in Zhao prison must have had something to do with the crown prince. What does he want to do? That's right. He also took all the money from the bank. Because of this, many large orders were taken away. The bank suffered a great loss. Little Chi said angrily. Gong Dai actually smiled with a trace of pride in his eyes. You're right. HM. He really has gone crazy. While Gong Dai was busy putting out the fire, the people in the palace were also anxious. The ground was covered with tossed memorials and documents. The emperor sat on the dragon, throne with his hands on his forehead. He was indescribably tired. Chang Shi hurriedly drove out all the palace servants who were kneeling down below and advised earnestly and earnestly. Your Majesty, your health is more important, huh? Emperor Cheng, who was rubbing his head, let out a deep laugh. It echoed in the hall in the middle of the night, making one's hair stand on end. Gong Che is really amazing when he doesn't make a move. Emperor Cheng sneered. He unscrupulously provoked Gong Dai. First, he knew that Gong Dai would listen to Mo and not counterattack. Second, even if he counterattacked, Gong Che would be happy to fight with Gong Dai. Good. Very good. A mountain can't have two tigers. It's natural for them to fight. Chang Shi's old face wrinkled. Your Majesty, the two princes will know what to do. Know what to do. Emperor Cheng's voice suddenly rose. Gong Che's withdrawal of funds has already made the people panic. The imperial army is fighting among themselves. Tonight, the Wang Fu is on fire. What's the next step? I'm afraid they're going to fight openly. At this time, a little eunuch came to deliver memorials overnight. Chang Shi glanced at them and didn't want to hand them over. But Emperor Cheng had already snatched them and read several of them. He was so angry that his face turned blue and his laughter became colder. Good. There are so many impeachment documents. I'm afraid there will be more tomorrow morning. This is already a fight. Chang Shi held the booklet in his hand as if he was holding a hot potato. The two princes quarreled like fire and water. The entire Zhaoyang Hall was like adding oil to a raging fire, about to burn at any moment. At this time, he missed the princess very much. If only the princess was here. If she was here, this kind of thing would absolutely not happen. At this time, Emperor Cheng also calmed down a little after throwing a tantrum. He really couldn't intervene in this matter. Now, Gong Che was only looking for Gong Dai to vent his anger. If he intervened, the situation would only be worse. It was even more impossible to stop Gong Dai from fighting back. Once he suppressed Gong Dai too much and Gong Dai resisted, it would be a fight to the death. He still remembered Gong Dai's words to him. Imperial father, you should thank royal sister. Without her, the entire imperial family would be my enemy. Now, As long as he thought of this sentence, he felt a chill down his spine. He was afraid that Gong Dai would also go crazy. Your Majesty, what should we do now? Chang, she felt that this matter must be resolved before Prince Qi counterattacked. After a long while, Emperor Cheng faintly said, "Didn't Gong Dai say that he's going to build a highway? Let him go." But Changshi was at a loss. But don't you still want Prince Qi to get married as soon as possible? Once he goes out of the country, the sky is high and the sea is wide, difficult to control. What else can we do? After Emperor Cheng said this, he seemed to have aged 10 years in an instant. In his heart, he knew very well that Gongju hadn't fought back until now because he had refused Gongju's request to leave the capital a few days ago. But now, the situation forced Gongju to make concession. He was afraid that this was exactly what Gongju wanted. Chapter 435. Eastern Palace. Gong Che was sitting in the study, reading a book with a smile on his face. He seemed to be in a good mood. At this time, someone knocked on the door. In the silent night, there was an indescribable chill. "Come in," Gong Che lazily said without even raising his head. In the Eastern Palace, everyone was his people, so they came and went alone without any defenses. When the person came in, the fragrance of cosmetics lingered around his nose, causing him to frown for no reason. As a result, when he looked up, he saw Su Miaolon wearing only a thin gauze dress. His gaze was subtle. Su Miaolon had thrown caution to the wind. She thought that the day of her wedding was already the greatest humiliation she had ever suffered in her life. But she didn't expect that the worst was yet to come. The crown prince wouldn't touch her at all. For this reason, she had thought of every method and tried every trick, but the crown prince was still cold and indifferent. Although he didn't embezzle her food and clothing, nor did he interfere with her rights as the crown princess, she was very clear that as long as she wasn't the crown princess woman, her position as the crown princess existed in name only. There was a possibility that she could be replaced at any time. The summer night was still a bit cold, especially when she was only wearing a gauze dress. When Gong Che's smiling gaze fell on her body, she shivered for no reason. She didn't understand why. But in any case, she didn't forget the reason why she was here, so she gathered her courage and took a step forward. "Your Highness, it's already so late. How about this concubine help you rest?" Her voice was seductive, but when it echoed in the cold study, it trembled slightly. Gong Che held a book in his hand and sat upright. One could see that his bearing was excellent, and his aura was even stronger than before. At this time, he quietly looked at Su Miaolon with a gentle expression. But Su Miaolon's body stiffened, and she couldn't speak for a long time. "Are you here to seduce me? Is the crown prince's residence not treating you well? So much so that you want a yard after taking an inch?" Su Miaolon was shocked. She repeatedly shook her head. "No, no, no. The crown prince is very good to this concubine. It's just that," she lowered her head. "It's just that this concubine is still the crown prince's wife. Now, I just want to fulfill my duties as a wife." Gong Che suddenly smiled. His smile was like a spring breeze with an indescribable warmth. "If it was if she was my wife, she would have walked over to seduce me." His tone was so tender and affectionate, as if he was looking forward to that scene. However, this sudden sentence caused Su Miaolon's face to turn deathly pale. She clenched her teeth tightly, her veiled body trembling with anger. What could be more humiliating than her husband comparing her to another woman when she was seducing him? However, Gong Che still underestimated the thickness of Su Miaolon's skin. She approached Gong Che step by step, her delicate body slightly trembling. That gauze dress simply couldn't cover anything. Her figure was completely exposed in the man's line of sight, and a smile once again appeared on her face. "Your Highness, why don't you give it a try? As long as you try once, you will know that this concubine is much stronger than that Gong Yimo." She said the last few words with gritted teeth. The smile on her face had stiffened, but her body was as relaxed as possible. Her thoughts were somewhat reasonable. Gong Che had never been close to women, So how could he know the beauty of women? As long as he tried once, she guaranteed that he would never forget it again. As long as she was given a chance. She stuck out her chest, and her charming body became even more alluring. She was almost 20 years old, and her body was mature. She didn't believe that Gong Che wouldn't be captivated after trying once. Just once. With this thought, she gathered her courage and threw herself at Gong Che, but she was blocked by Gong Che's book. He sat down as she lowered her head. At that moment, she clearly saw Gong Che's eyes and a coldness that could freeze 1,000 miles. Don't compare yourself to him, he chuckled, and his lowered voice sounded like a ghost. In this concubine's eyes, you can't even compare to a single strand of her hair. Su Miaolon could no longer maintain her smile, and her face began to burn with pain. Gong Che, on the other hand, was very interested. He stood up and looked at the woman in front of him, who was trying her best to marry him. Seeing this, Su Miaolon's anger froze, and she wished she could run away. Before, she didn't feel it because Gong Che had been smiling. But now his smile gradually froze, causing Su Miaolon to feel fear. The crown prince in front of her was no longer the gentle, jade-like crown prince. He was clearly fine before, but at this moment, his terrifying appearance on the day of the wedding appeared once again. Su Miaolon stood there, her voice seemingly frozen, and her body was drenched in cold sweat. Crown Prince, I am your wife. Her eyes were filled with tears, but her body kept retreating. He had treated her with courtesy after their marriage, but that didn't mean that she had the capital to take a mile after taking an inch. Gong Che used the book to lift her chin and carefully looked at her. What should I do? You and Amor don't look alike at all. Looking at you, this concubine has no desire. At that moment, Su Miaolon was so ashamed that she wanted to die. But before she could resist, Gong Che's gaze gradually froze. An invisible, murderous aura caused her to freeze like a frightened cat. This concubine told you before that if you wanted to marry this concubine would give you the honor of being the crown prince's concubine. But that's all. But his bloodthirsty gaze fell on Su Miaolon's exposed neck, and his deep voice seemed to come from the netherworld. But if you want to take a mile after taking an inch, this crown prince's residence can give you honor, but it can also make you die without a burial place. After saying this, Gong Che walked away, not caring about Su Miaolon's life or death. He left for a long time before Su Miaolon finally dared to breathe heavily. She supported herself on the chair in front of her with both hands and looked at the open door with resentment. Her heart was filled with hatred. Why was Gong Yimo everywhere? Why did Gong Yimo want to harm her like this? If Gong Yimo didn't exist, the crown prince would absolutely not hate her so much. When she was young, a master had said that she had the fate of the phoenix. But all of this was destroyed by Gong Yimo. But hatred was hatred. Resentment was resentment. Gong Che's cold words just now still lingered in her ears, so she didn't dare to do anything. On Gong Yimo's side, the two of them were lying on a hillside, looking forward. Below the hillside, rows of soldiers were patrolling around, and the security was tight. But under the night sky, they didn't notice two people peeping on the hillside. Don't you feel that the atmosphere in the campsite is a bit strange? Gong Yimo asked softly. Baichio frowned and observed, it seems to be martial law. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but worry. Why was it martial law? Did something happen to father? Gong Yimo was a bit distressed. If only she could shrink, then she could quietly sneak in and take a look. At this moment, she suddenly exclaimed, "Oh no, what's wrong?" Baichio also became nervous. Gong Yimo said with a bit of a headache, "My pet seems to have been left behind by me in Zhao City." Chapter 436. She could only blame the monkey for not having any sense of presence. She only remembered that she had left her package in the governor's residence when she needed it. She did not know if the little monkey had managed to escape. Baichio glared at her. She still had the mood to care about her pet at such a time. What should we do now? The guards are so strict that we can't sneak in. Gong Yimo smiled and patted his shoulder like an old man. It's time to show you the difference in our strength. Do you know why you can only be a waiter? Because you are too weak. After saying that, Gong Yimo went down without waiting for Bai Chio's response. Moreover, she really grasped the timing. It was the moment when the two teams crossed each other. She sneaked in like a ghost without alerting anyone. That Qinggong was simply amazing. Although Bai Chio was unwilling, he was convinced. This woman's martial arts were much better than his. He did not know if she had been practicing martial arts since she was in her mother's womb. Otherwise, how could she be so powerful? Gong Yimo sneaked in, but it wasn't as easy as she appeared to be. If it weren't for the fact that it was night and she was wearing black clothes, she would have been discovered long ago. This camp had 2,000 people on duty in the middle of the night. She didn't know what was happening. Gong Yimo swayed left and right and finally reached the largest tent. However, she could not get close to it. The tent was surrounded by guards. Even if she turned into a bird and flew over, she would be shot down. However, it was better to be early than to arrive at the right time. Someone walked out of the main tent and asked anxiously. That person just shook his head and said something. The doctor said it will be in a few days. How could it be so fast? The person who asked looked pained. I'm afraid the document has not reached the capital yet. Young master also did not find it. What should we do? The person who came out of the main tent sighed. It's all that damn assassin's fault. I don't know where he came from. Gong Yimo, who was behind him, didn't listen much and quickly retreated. Bai Chio's eyes lit up when he saw her return. How was it? Gong Yimo shook her head and asked. Back then, Imperial Father took pity on Bai Ji's loyalty, so he specially allowed Bai Ji to promote himself to the position of general, right? Bai Chio didn't know why she asked that, but he nodded. If Father dies, he has the right to choose who the next great general will be. Gong Yimo rolled her eyes. Then your father's situation isn't good. Although I didn't go in, I heard a few words. Your father seems to have been assassinated and his life is hanging by a thread. Moreover, they can't find where you are now. They're all worried. How is that possible? Bai Chio was the first to not believe it. Father's martial arts are unparalleled. How can a mere small fry be a match for father? Gong Yimo thought more about it. There are assassins, but they might not necessarily be outsiders. She looked at Bai Chio, and her eyes suddenly flashed with a trace of craftiness. I'm sure you can't care so much now. Since that's the case, you can leave and see your father for the last time. Nonsense. His father was fine. This woman must be lying to him. A woman's words can't be trusted. Therefore, he didn't want to wait any longer and directly went down the hill. Soon, he alarmed the patrolling guards and was surrounded. Who is it? The leader shouted. Bai Chio was worried about his father and hurriedly said, I am Bai Ji's son. Please pass the message. I want to see my father. Bai Ji's son. Many people looked at each other in dismay. Because they rarely saw Bai Chio, they didn't believe it. However, someone still went to pass the message. Gong Yimo watched from afar, looking forward to the next big show. The person who came wasn't Bai Ji, which made Bai Chio even more worried. Fortunately, he knew this person. He was his father's military advisor. Uncle Lu. Lu Jing came over to take a look and found that it was indeed Bai Chio. He frowned and didn't say anything. Military advisor Lu, this person said that he is General Bai's son. Does General Bai have a son? Why haven't I seen him before? Someone whispered, it seems that he does have a son, but I remember that he is a burly bearded man and not a pretty boy. That's right. He doesn't look like General Bai at all. Military advisor Lu. Can you see clearly that he is not an imposter? Bai Chio finally felt that something was wrong. Because Gong Yimo didn't come out with him, he could only put his hope on Lu Jing. Although it had been 2 years, Lu Jing still supported him to take revenge. There was no reason that he didn't remember him now. Uncle Lu, I am Chio. However, Lu Jing shook his head. The sky is too dark, and his appearance is very different. Now is an eventful time. Take him into custody first, and let the deputy general identify him tomorrow. When he said that, Bai Chio was angry. Military advisor Lu, I just shaved my beard and you don't recognize me? You were the one who supported me to take revenge. Lu Jing was a middle-aged man with a white face. At this time, he frowned. I haven't seen Gongzi for 2 years. Who knows if you're an imposter or not? Take him into custody. Yes. Many people came to arrest Bai Qiu. He originally wanted to resist, but the soldiers beside him were all trained by his father. He couldn't bear to do so. So be it. Tomorrow, when he sees the Deputy General Lu, he will see the situation. There was one more thing that he didn't say. Gong Yimou hadn't appeared yet. She obviously expected this scene and deliberately encouraged him to come out to be arrested. Damn it, she must be hiding in the dark to watch the show. He was right. Gong Yimou was watching the show. However, after Bai Qiu was taken away, Lu Jing was still worried. He ordered the patrolling soldiers to search the surroundings, fearing that there were spies and accomplices. In his words, he didn't admit that Bai Qiu was General Bai's son. Gong Yimou raised her eyebrows and gloated. Then, she got up and hid. The next morning, Bai Qiu was awakened by water. When he saw the Deputy General Lu, his eyes lit up. Brother Lu, I am Qiu. However, when he saw Lu Jin's cold eyes, Bai Qiu's heart sank. Before seeing Lu Jin, he could still lie to himself that his father was fine, that he had only been assassinated. But now, after seeing Lu Jin, all his hopes had turned into wishful thinking. His father's subordinates had betrayed him. Could his father still be safe? Tell me, who are you? Why are you impersonating General Bai's son? What is your purpose? Bai Qiu frowned and stared at him for a long time. Lu Jin, you pretended not to know me. You're quite good at it. To think that my father trusted you so much. I'm Bai Ji's son. I guarantee it. If you have the guts, let me see my father. Lu Jin sneered. General Bai doesn't have a son. And you are just an imposter assassin. Chapter 437. Lu Jin, you're really heartless. Have you forgotten? If it wasn't for Father, you would have been beaten to death by those thugs. Even when Father saw how brave he was, he even took him in as his foster son. Bai Qiu's face turned red. He wanted to make a move, but he was suppressed by others. Moreover, he noticed that there were many people in this camp who were secretly colluding with Lu Jin. This indicated that Father's situation was even more dangerous. Lu Jin was much more ruthless than Bai Qiu imagined. He looked at Bai Qiu, who was unwilling to accept his fate, and laughed. This person pretended to be General Bai's son. His intentions are sinister. It's better to execute him directly. He said the word execute so easily, completely disregarding their childhood friendship. The subordinate asked, flogging or beheading? No. Lu Jin looked at Bai Qiu condescendingly. Cut his face, cut the tendons in his arms and legs, then throw him out to feed the wolves. Bai Qiu looked up in shock. He didn't expect this person, who always took care of him like a big brother, would be so vicious. Lu Jin bent down and looked at him. He whispered, Are you unwilling to accept this? Do you want to kill me very much? What a pity. Bai Ji was smart all his life, but he gave birth to such a stupid son. But it's okay. I will wipe away this stain for my foster father soon. Lu Jin, I will let you go even if I become a ghost. Just when someone handed a knife to Lu Jin slowly picked up a knife. His gaze stopped on Bai Qiu's face, as if he was thinking of where to start. At this moment, a person quickly ran in. Not good, Deputy General. Lu Jin hated the word deputy, but still said in a deep voice, What's the matter? That person said loudly, The princess is here. Bai Qiu was slightly stunned. Only then did Lu Jin's look turn solemn. Princess Gu Gua? Yes. Damn it. Lu Jin cursed. How did she come so fast? Why didn't there any news from Zhao City? That person was just about to say this. There's news from Zhao City. It said that the idiot from Yi family was killed by the princess a few days ago. Lu Jin frowned. At this moment, he thought of something and suddenly questioned Bai Qiu. Wait, aren't you in Zhao City? You suddenly came back. Have you seen the princess? What princess? I don't know. Bai Qiu sneered. Why are you scared now? What were you doing earlier? If you know what's good for you, then quickly release my father. Killing intent flashed in Lu Jin's eyes. He walked closer to Bai Chio. Suddenly, he bent down and slashed his face. I'll deal with you later. Let's go. After Lu Jin left, Bai Chio covered his face with one hand. He was suddenly worried. No matter what, Gong Yimo was a woman. Even if she was strong in martial arts, she wouldn't be at a disadvantage when facing a ruthless person like Lu Jin, right? Thinking of this, he felt a little conflicted. He was afraid that he would implicate Gong Yimo. He could only say that he did not understand Gong Yimo at all. At this time, Gong Yimo was wearing a complicated palace dress and a jade ornament on her head. Just by sitting there, even if she did not do anything, she gave people a feeling of being honored. Even if she did not bring any attendants, no one would suspect that she was not a princess. When Lu Jin came in, he saw the princess sitting and drinking tea. An undercurrent flashed in his eyes as he respectfully walked in. Dragon City Camp's Lu Jin greets the princess. He kneeled on the ground and saluted. I didn't know the princess was coming. Please forgive me for not coming out to greet you. Gong Yimo knocked on the lid of the bowl, making a crisp sound. She then looked down at the person at her feet. She did not call him to stand up and only said, This princess is a little unhappy. Her voice was like a pearl. Just by listening to it, Lu Jin felt his blood rushing to his head. He could not help but raise his head and lowered his voice by 8 degrees. What is the princess worried about? Tell me. This official is willing to solve the princess's worries. Gong Yimo said with grievance. This princess's pet is missing. He disappeared in this place. This princess wants to find him. Lu Jin quickly said, I don't know what the princess's pet looks like. This official will send someone to find him? Gong Yimo tapped her lips with her jade finger and said, His looks are passable. His brain is also normal. It's just that he is a little impulsive and a little conceited. At this moment, Lu Jin finally felt that something was wrong. She did not say that he was an animal, but Bai Chio. Gong Yimo smiled and looked at him. Originally, this princess wanted to directly pass through the border and go to Yuqi. But now that the pet is missing, this princess wants to find Bai Ji to ask for an explanation. Lu Jin's expression became worse and worse. Gong Yimo said again, General Lu, right? This princess will give you 2 choices. 1. This princess wants to see Bai Ji. 2. This princess wants to get back her pet, Bai Chio. As expected, her premonition came true. Lu Jin suddenly looked at Gong Yimo gloomily and stood up. He was close to 2 meters tall, like an iron tower looming in front of her, causing Gong Yimo to raise her eyebrows slightly. She sat there and looked at him calmly. You seem to have a problem with this princess's request. Lu Jin smiled. I don't dare. I believe that princess already knows about General Bai's illness. Gong Yimo nodded. Lu Jin said, It just so happens that this humble subject also knows that princess came here alone. And now, the 50,000 people in the Dragon City camp all listen to this humble subject's orders. So, Gong Yimo smiled, like a fox charming people, causing Lu Jin's originally cold voice to soften a little. So, this humble subject advises Princess to come out of seclusion as soon as possible. The Dragon City camp does not have much to do with Princess's interests. On the contrary, if the Dragon City camp stays in this humble subject's hands, it will be a good thing for Princess. That Bai Ji is a boorish man who is inflexible and does not know how to be flexible. But this humble subject is different. As long as Princess turns a blind eye, this humble subject will be at your beck and call if Princess needs anything in Yuqi in the future. This humble subject will definitely not be worse than Bai Ji and his son. Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes slightly and said slowly, You are smart. He knew the real reason why she brought Bai Chio along. Lu Jin smiled. This humble subject's brain is still good. But in this humble subject's opinion, Princess is the real smart person. Regarding the pros and cons, I believe Princess will make the right decision, right? Gong Yimo thought for a while. Your proposal is very tempting. Speaking of which, this princess does not care who is in charge of the Dragon City camp, but you must return by Chiyo to this princess. Why? Lu Jin frowned, somewhat puzzled. Gong Yimo blinked and said somewhat embarrassedly, Bai Chiyo is young and handsome. After this princess has him, this is the time when I want to have him. I can leave this place, but this princess really can't leave Bai Chiyo. Lu Jin saw her yearning look, and his Adam's apple moved. This humble subject is not worse than Bai Chiyo. Princess. Gong Yimo shook her head and said faintly, If you want to mind your own business, this is the bottom line. Chapter 438. Her unyielding attitude made Lu Jin ponder deeply. He thought, was this princess really blinded by lust, or was she just stalling for time? She wanted to save Bai Chiyo, but it didn't make sense according to the time. Even if she and Bai Chiyo knew each other, it was only a few days. It was impossible for them to have deep feelings for each other. She wouldn't risk her life for someone she only knew for a few days. This was not in line with her interests, so he still believed that this princess really liked Bai Chiyo and treated him as a boy toy. She even wanted to bring him to Yuchi and enjoy him along the way. But he couldn't agree to it. He said regretfully, Princess, you're late. Last night, this subject caught him. To prevent people from being unsettled, this subject has already disfigured his face. I'm afraid that Princess will lose your appetite if you see it. Gong Yimo suddenly became furious. What do you mean? Bai Chiyo is the man that this consort has been doting on recently. You actually dare to disfigure his face. She really played the role of a lecherous princess so well that Lu Jin believed her a little more. Princess, there are many handsome men. Even if you don't like this subject, you can still find one in the camp. There will definitely be someone who looks better than Bai Chiyo. But it was a pity that she didn't like him. But he was still very interested in her body. Gong Yimo pouted, it's fine. This consort has medicine in her hands. Bring this consort to see how it's ruined. Lu Jin saw that she still didn't relent and frowned. He's just a boy toy. His face is already gone. Why is Princess still thinking about him? Gong Yimo rolled her eyes and glanced at him. What do you know? Do I need to tell you about the beauty of it? Lu Jin's body went limp from her gaze. Gong Yimo shouted, Quickly bring me there. He thought for a while and agreed. Anyway, there were more than 50,000 people in this camp. So what if she was the princess? She came to his territory alone. Was he afraid that she would overturn the heavens? Thus, the group of people went down to the dungeon. As expected, Gong Yimo saw Bai Chiyo whose face was covered in blood. She sighed in her heart. In her previous life, Bai Ji helped her a lot, so she still had the heart to take care of this Bai Chiyo. Although she didn't agree with his character and behavior, she turned a blind eye to it because of her relationship with Bai Ji. She didn't expect that he was really disfigured. She didn't know if urine powder was effective on his injury. As soon as he saw Bai Chiyo, he was still in shock as to why Gong Yimo would appear here. Gong Yimo let out a delicate shout. Didn't I tell you to go hunting? Why did you come here? It seems that this consort needs to properly teach you what it means to be a boy toy. Boy toy. Bai Chiyo's entire body stiffened. The way he looked at Gong Yimo was like he was about to spit fire. However, he wasn't stupid enough to expose him at this time. He lowered his head and said, I'm sorry, Princess. Lu Jin watched from the side and suddenly laughed. Bai Chiyo, I didn't expect that you would have such a day. Didn't you look down on women the most? Now you are actually a gigolo. When Bai Chiyo heard this, he clenched his fists tightly and forcefully suppressed his temper. Gong Yimo wasn't happy. What does General Lu mean? Are you looking down on this consort? I don't dare to. It's just that since this fellow is already disfigured, why don't Princess abandon him and pick another one? Gong Yimo snorted, I don't care. As long as he can be used, it's fine. As for the face, she frowned. It's the same even if the lights are off. Quickly bring him out. This consort has something to say to him. Lu Jin saw that Gong Yimo was determined to bring Bai Chiyo away and was somewhat hesitant. Gong Yimo slightly raised her eyebrows and said at the right time, Why? This camp is filled with general's people. Could it be that General is afraid that a weak woman like me or a boy toy can do something? Why would I? Lu Jin recalled that this princess was said to know some martial arts. He gave up on the idea of falling out in the prison and said with a smile, "Since Princess wants him, then bring him away. Princess, please rest for a while. This humble official will go and prepare a banquet to entertain Princess." Gong Yimo arrogantly nodded, sure. Just like this, Baichio was directly sent to Gong Yimo's tent after being cleaned up. However, his face was still bleeding and the wound was very deep. She was afraid that the Jade Countenance powder wouldn't work. Only the muscle revitalization ointment that Si Wuyin took out last time would be effective. However, as a man, he could endure a face full of beard in the past. Now that he only had a scar, it wasn't a big deal. She hooked her finger at him. "Come and sit down." Baichio wasn't willing to get close to her, but he still sat down after hearing her words. Gong Yimo then took out the ointment and gauze to bandage him. When Gong Yimo's fingertips touched Baichio's face, he frowned in disgust. He hated being touched by all women since he was young. However, because Gong Yimo was very close to him, she lowered her voice and spoke. The people outside definitely couldn't hear it. "Just now, I saw that Lu Jin was temporarily in charge of the army. Because this was an order given by Bai Ji after he was injured, no one dared to go against it. However, after this order was given, Bai Ji was hidden by Lu Jin. Right now, we don't know if he's alive or dead." Baichio heard her words. Father has many loyal subordinates. It's impossible for all of them to betray him. Gong Yimo lowered her eyelids and tended to his wound. "There are those people. However, this morning I saw that Lu Jin sent those loyal to Bai Ji to patrol the border. In other words, the Dragon City camp is now his people. That's why I came in." Her words made Baichio's heart move. He glanced at Gong Yimo, who was so close to him. As if he was burned by her beauty, he immediately looked away. Why did you do this? Could it be that she really liked him? Gong Yimo knew what he was thinking at a glance. She smiled unhappily. "Put away those dirty thoughts in your mind. My sweetheart is 10,000 times better looking than you. I won't fall for a simple vegetable kanji like you." Baichio frowned. "That's good. I was just afraid that you had some conspiracy. After all, there was no free lunch in the world. Why was she so good to him?" Gong Yimo sneered. "Conspiracy? You should be thankful that you have a good father." It was actually related to his father? Baichio racked his brains, but couldn't think of any connection. He simply stopped thinking about it. What should we do next? Father's life is at stake. Don't worry. Gong Yimo thought for a moment. The tiger tally is split into two. As long as Bai Ji doesn't hand over the other half, Lu Jin won't kill him. However, the situation is different now. Since we're here, Lu Jin will definitely speed up the process. Perhaps he will choose to kill him directly and then let others support him to become the new general of the border. Although it's not legitimate to do this, what's done is done. As long as the capital is well organized, Father will definitely be deceived. After all, the emperor gave Bai Ji the privilege to choose his successor. It was easy to hide it. Baichio was burning with anxiety. When do you think they will take action? Gong Yimo thought for a moment. At the latest tonight. Chapter 439. It was a dark and windy night. Your Highness, why do you want to hand over the control of the Imperial Army? Won't the crown prince be like a tiger that has grown wings? Lo Qi asked in confusion. On horseback, Gong Ju leisurely trotted along. Because I don't need it anymore. Don't need it? Lo Qi was even more confused. Who would complain about having too many subordinates? He looked at the 3,000 people behind him. These people were willing to follow Gong Dai from the Imperial Army. In other words, they would become Gong Dai's private army and were all loyal. If they could leave with Gong Dai, they probably didn't have any relatives to worry about. They left the city in the middle of the night under the emperor's order to build the national highway. However, once they were out of the city, Gong Dai reined in his horse and said to Lo Qi, "You take your men and leave first. I still have things to do." Luo Qi didn't dare to ask about Gong Ju's whereabouts. He received the order and left first. Gong Ju only selected 50 people to stay behind, then turned around and went to another road. Gong Che kept pushing him. Although it was exactly what he wanted, he had already achieved his goal. Before leaving, how could he not return the favor? Gong Dai sneered with a bloodthirsty look in his eyes. Gong Che also knew that Gong Dai wouldn't let him go. When he thought of Gong Dai leaving in the middle of the night, Gong Che wasn't happy at all. Instead, he was angry. It was like punching cotton, but he couldn't go against the emperor's will. Gong Che's jade-like fingers moved around the map. This map was the distribution map of the capital. Gong Che's family was big, and many of his strongholds were in the capital. Gong Dai would definitely make him suffer a great loss. Therefore, he hesitated between the Dragon Tiger Gorge and the 100 Cities barracks. Dragon Tiger Gorge was where Gong Che's own fleet was docked. It was very safe. There were mountains on two sides, water on one side, and only one way out. If Gong Dai went there, he would be like a turtle in a jar. He might even be able to kill him. Gong Dai's military power was handed over to one of his subordinates. Gong Dai was very familiar with this place, and it would be easy for him to play tricks there. These two places were very far apart, and Gong Dai had few subordinates. It was impossible for him to go to both places. So, which place would he choose? No matter what, it was easier to attack the 100 Cities barracks, and there was no risk. However, Gong Dai might take risks. Gong Che reclined in his chair and let go of his thoughts. Suddenly, there was a sudden clap of thunder. It was raining again. Under the drizzle, Gong Dai and his group galloped toward a certain place. His goal had never changed. Little Seven followed him. He knew that the prince was definitely going to find trouble with the crown prince. However, they only had so many people. Could they succeed? With so many people, it was not enough to go to the 100 Cities barracks. However, it was enough to go to Dragon Tiger Gorge. Gong Dai closed his eyes and allowed the rain to wet his hair and clothes. However, he could smell the scent of freedom. Gong Che also opened his eyes and quickly ordered people to go out. His subordinate, Muyu, carefully asked, "Your Highness, where are we going?" Gong Che said without turning his head, "Gather the entire army. We're going to Dragon Tiger Gorge." He did not have any plans to split up the army because he wanted to directly kill Gong Dai. He predicted that Gong Dai would definitely go to Dragon Tiger Gorge. That place was dangerous, but there was no defense. Gong Dai would definitely go there. The night was pitch black. Under the illumination of the palace lanterns, the raindrops formed a line. Even though it was summer, people could still feel the chill. Gong Che's entire army was mobilized. The momentum was definitely not small. When Gong Cheng heard the report, he sneered. If either Gong Che or Gong Dai died, perhaps it would be a good thing. In any case, if he interfered, the situation would become even more out of control. However, although he said that he was cold-blooded, in fact, he was so worried that he could not sleep at all. He did not want to send his son away. The rainy night seemed to have sped up the dangerous pace. Gong Ju and the others were focused on their journey. No one spoke, and everyone's faces were grim. They knew that Longhu Gorge was a dangerous place. Once they were surrounded, it would be a dead end. "Your Highness, we have arrived at Dragon Tiger Gorge," Little Seven said. The first thing they saw were countless ships between the two mountains. The soldiers guarding the ships saw them and quickly stopped them. Gong Dai did not say much. He pulled out his narrow sword. The sword shook and countless water droplets were scattered. "Kill." He gave the order softly, but it was as sharp as the edge of a sword. Gong Yimo, who was far away in the north, was somewhat absent-minded. Lu Jin kept toasting her, as if he wanted to make her drunk. She was at a loss on how to find out by Ji's whereabouts. Even if she kidnapped Lu Jin or killed him, what if his subordinates killed by Ji in anger? Suddenly, she felt something under her clothes. She lifted it up and saw a black and gray monkey lying under her clothes. It was obviously exhausted. She did not know why it could find her from so far away and follow her. For no reason, it made Gong Yimo's heart feel warm. It came at the right time. She poked it with her hand. The monkey glared at her and turned over unhappily. At this time, Gong Yimo saw something hanging on its chest. She took it out and saw that it was a bamboo slip. She opened it and saw a letter inside. Strange. Could it be that this monkey met someone? She opened the paper and saw that it was full of words. Gong Yimo did not recognize any of them. Since she did not recognize them, she wanted to keep them for later. However, those words seemed to have magical powers. She clearly did not recognize them, but she read them carefully one by one. Gong Yimo frowned and threw the letter into her space. At this time, Lu Jin and the others were surrounded by many women. These were the military prostitutes in the camp. This kind of behavior was definitely not something that Bai Ji could tolerate. They must have been found after Lu Jin took over. From this, one could see the difference in character between the two. Gong Yimo pulled the little monkey's ear and said softly, "Sleep later. Go and do something for me." The little monkey moved its little body and pointed its butt at her. It was still angry. It did not want to care about this woman. Gong Yimo was speechless. She pulled its ear again and said fiercely, "Hurry up, or I will eat you." I heard that monkey brains are very nutritious. As soon as she said that, the little monkey clawed back. This person was simply a pervert. Gong Yimo smiled. "Go and look at every corner of the camp. There's a place that must be heavily guarded. Moreover, there's a person. I want to find him." The little monkey tilted its head and thought for a while. "Do you understand?" Gong Yimo looked at it threateningly. It shrunk its body and hurriedly left. At this time, Lu Jin inadvertently saw a black shadow. Perhaps it was some small animal. He did not care about it and walked towards Gong Yimo with a wine glass. After drinking some wine, his lust increased. Looking at Gong Yimo's beautiful face, he could not suppress the thoughts in his heart. "Princess, you are a person who knows how to enjoy life. Why would you like that gigolo by Chio?" Chapter 440. At this time, Baichio came in with wine. He walked to Gong Yimo's side, but was stopped by Gong Yimo. She smiled. "Your face is a bit pale, but it's useful. Do you have a problem with it?" Lu Jin's body went limp from being stared at by that pair of beautiful eyes. He nodded repeatedly. "No problem, no problem. Look at this subject. I'm also very useful." As he spoke, he was extremely daring and actually reached out his hand towards Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo stepped back and then pulled Baichio to block his hand. In the next second, Baichio actually sat in Gong Yimo's arms. The wine pot in his hand was also snatched away by Gong Yimo. This position made him feel so ashamed that he wanted to die. However, he endured it in front of Lu Jin. He wanted to see what Gong Yimo meant by this. Lu Jin was a bit resentful when his hand was blocked. He secretly glared at Baichio and said coldly, "Poor General Bai, you have a heroic reputation, but your son is actually a gigolo. Don't you think it's funny?" The people in the tent were very cooperative. The people who were loyal to Bai Ji were all transferred out, so Lu Jin had no scruples. The words he said made Baichio want to pull out his sword and kill him. "Don't move." Feeling Baichio's body suddenly tense, Gong Yimo warned in a low voice. Baichio was uncomfortable, and she also felt uncomfortable hugging him. If Gong Dai found out, her body trembled and she didn't dare to think about it anymore. "General Lu, you're scaring the lovely person in Ben Gong's arms." Gong Yimo grabbed Baichio to calm him down, then looked up at Lu Jin and said in a cold voice. He wanted to cooperate, but what was the meaning of stepping on her people? Lu Jin heard her dissatisfaction and immediately smiled. "Princess, please forgive me." This subject drank wine and spoke without thinking. "I made a fool of myself." Gong Yimo lowered her eyelids. "If there's nothing else, then leave. Don't hinder Ben Gong from flirting with Baichio." Flirting? Baichio had goosebumps all over his body, but Gong Yimo's hand held him tightly, preventing him from ruining things. Lu Jin was stunned. He felt that perhaps he was really making a mountain out of a molehill. This princess was obviously a pervert with some tricks and brains. There was really nothing to be wary of. Then, should he still kill Bai Ji tonight? Lu Jin pondered as he walked back. "What are you trying to do?" Grabbing Gong Yimo's collar, Baichio gritted his teeth and asked in a low voice. He wasn't a boy toy. He wasn't a gigolo. Gong Yimo had a headache. All along, the men she met, except for Shun Shiyi, were all calm and self-controlled. It was the first time she met someone like Bai Chio, who was old-fashioned and irritable. If you move again and fail to save your father, don't blame me. Gong Yimo lowered her voice and whispered in his ear. Her hot breath made Bai Chio's hair stand on end. His face was tense as he sat in Gong Yimo's embrace like a block of wood. After a while, he finally understood what she meant. Do you have a way? His voice lower by an octave. Who told him to ask for help? Gong Yimo was satisfied. You'll know in a while. Now drink. As she spoke, she poured the wine that Bai Chio brought in earlier into his mouth. She created the illusion that she was really flirting with a boy toy. The more ridiculous she acted, the more relaxed Lu Jin became. So Gong Yimo simply took revenge by pouring wine down his throat. Because she poured it down too quickly, the wine fell from the corner of his mouth, giving off a lewd feeling. Bai Chio was being hugged by Gong Yimo. His face was flushed with shame and anger. His thick eyebrows were knitted into a dead knot, but his eyes were half closed, and for a moment, his eyes were glittering. At such a close distance, Gong Yimo looked at his side profile and felt a sense of amazement. Many people looked over and secretly swallowed their saliva. Although Bai Chio was sitting in Gong Yimo's embrace, he did not feel out of place, because the way Gong Yimo poured wine down his throat was really overbearing and charming. It made people want to drag Bai Chio away and replace him with their own bodies. They suddenly realized that if the other party was Gong Yimo, being a boy toy did not seem so unacceptable. Thinking about it, their breathing quickened. Because of the wine, their bodies were already hot, and the scene in front of them made their blood boil. What about Bai Chio? He was already stunned. He clearly hated being touched by women the most. He clearly thought that if Gong Yimo really wanted him to be a boy toy, he would fight with his life. But now, Gong Yimo saw that he choked on the wine and smiled proudly while wiping his face with a handkerchief. He raised his head and saw a pair of eyes that seemed to gather thousands of stars in front of him. He was a little dazed and forgot to be angry. At this time, the monkey actually came back. Seeing the monkey, Bai Chio quickly regained his senses and saw Gong Yimo lowering her head and whispering into his ear. The warm fragrance wrapped around him. What he did not know was that this was the smell that the current Prince Chi was obsessed with. Do you understand? Bai Chio felt that she stuffed something into his hand and nodded after a long time. Then, he saw Gong Yimo kissing him in public. According to the plan, he should have splashed the wine on the table at her, but seeing her smiling red lips, that bright color, made his heart beat faster and faster. He even hoped that she would kiss him like this. But Gong Yimo saw that he was in a daze and fiercely pinched him. Bai Chio hurriedly grabbed the wine on the table and poured on her face. Then, his eyes became watery and he gasped for breath. It seemed that he had experienced an incomparable struggle. He originally wanted to say something to express his anger, but the next second he was shocked by the shocking beauty in front of him and could not say a word. The wine flowed down her sparkling face and wet her hair and long eyelashes. She began to close her eyes and let the wine drip down. Then, she suddenly opened her eyes. At that moment, her beauty had an impact. It almost made him suffocate. The so-called pear blossom with spring rain. In the past, Bai Chio did not understand what a stunning beauty was. Why would a woman be called an enchantress that could bring disaster to a country? Why would someone spend a lot of money for a woman's smile? He did not understand in the past, and even scoffed at it. But now he understood. He looked on helplessly as the pair of smiling eyes turned vicious. She slapped Bai Chio. Bastard, just because I think highly of you, you can go against me? Gong Yimo pushed him away. Bai Chio covered his face and left her embrace. So it was this kind of cold feeling. Lu Jin saw that they were quarreling and quickly said, Princess, are you okay? As he spoke, he walked towards Gong Yimo and fiercely kicked Bai Chio. Who do you think you are? Princess thought highly of you and gave you some face. You still want to take advantage of her? Bai Chio was kicked by his enemy. He pinched his palm and endured it. He glared at Gong Yimo. I didn't do anything wrong. You shouldn't have done it in front of so many people. Baichio bit his lips. He was so embarrassed that he wanted to die. He played the role of a young master who was forced to be a gigolo in front of so many people. Gong Yimo secretly nodded and coldly snorted. I don't believe that I can't tame you. Just you wait. I will change my clothes and come over. At that time, I want you to please me in front of so many people. You better prepare. Chapter 441. After Gong Yimo finished speaking, she flung her sleeves and left. Lu Jin was amused. Forcing Baichio to please a woman in front of so many people. Was there anything more humiliating than this? This was good, just what he wanted. However, Lu Jin was still not at ease. He sent someone who knew martial arts to follow her. Since Baichio was still here, he was not worried about Gong Yimo causing trouble. Gong Yimo naturally noticed that person immediately. She walked in her tent, then cut a hole in the back of the tent and went out. When that person saw that Gong Yimo was about to change her clothes, his lust was aroused. He immediately forgot to hide and went over to take a look. In the end, he was knocked unconscious by Gong Yimo. It was raining in Dayu State, but there was still a bright moon hanging high in the sky. It shone on her cold eyes, and the corner of her mouth carried a trace of evil smile. She patted Little Monkey. Let's go, it's up to you. When Little Monkey heard this, he quickly led the way. Gong Yimo followed closely behind. She held a hidden blade in her hand and calmly walked into the depths of the camp. Gong Yimo did not return for a long time. Lu Jin finally felt uneasy. He originally saw that Gong Yimo was blinded by greed and was not afraid of her, so he wanted to let Baiji live for a few more days. After all, killing him was the last resort. But now he cannot sit still. However, Baichio was still here. Gong Yimo would not leave him behind. Thinking of this, he did not dare to act rashly. You go and see why the princess is not back yet. He pointed to a general beside him. He personally went. Baichio held the thing in his hand and was a little puzzled. It was said that the thing in his hand could hurt people if it was thrown to the ground. However, he was still a little uneasy. Could he really save his father tonight? On the other side, rain was falling. Gong Dai did not do much, but the soldiers stationed at Dragon Tiger Gorge were all slaughtered. He looked at the hundreds of ships in front of him and smiled faintly. Burn them. That was more than 100 ships. Gong Che earned a lot of money by relying on them. Yes, Little Seven accepted the order excitedly. Fortunately, the rain wasn't too heavy. They could start a fire from the inside and set the ship ablaze. How much had Gong Che caused him to lose? Tonight, he was going to make Gong Che lose even more. These ships were a major pillar of Gong Che's economy. If they were burned, how long would Gong Che be able to keep his peace? After setting the fire, the continuous flames reflected the continuous rain. Because the boat was in the water, Gong Dai was not worried that the fire would spread to the shore. Looking at the jumping flames, the depression in his heart was swept away, and he was in a good mood. Suddenly, the sound of horse hooves could be heard from afar. Judging from the sound, there were obviously quite a number of people. Little Seven was anxious. The ship was burned, and their only way out was blocked. How are they going to leave? When Gong Dai heard the commotion, he calmly led his men in a certain direction. Little Seven thought about the terrain. That place was a dead end, but the prince had already left, so he couldn't hesitate. He quickly led the rest of the people to follow. But the worry in his heart grew heavier. He was afraid that a fierce battle was unavoidable. Gong Che quickly arrived, but because he was late, the ship was destroyed. His face was tense, and he wanted to cut Gong Dai into pieces. Someone went down to check the traces and reported, "Reporting to your highness, the thief ran in that direction." Gong Che looked. That place was clearly a dead end. Why did Gong Dai want to go there? Originally, he thought that Gong Dai would choose to leave by water. But now, he couldn't be sure. Muyu, this subject is here. Take 100 men and stay behind to put out the fire. The rest, follow me. Muyu didn't agree. If everyone stayed behind to put out the fire, the losses would be much smaller. It was not easy to build these ships. They couldn't be built in a day. But Gong Che had already made up his mind. He lowered his head and accepted the order. Yes. Gong Che left with his men without looking back. Naturally, he was also very clear that without these ships, his losses would be great. He also knew that if everyone stayed behind now, they would definitely be able to save these ships. But what they didn't know was that Gong Ju was his only goal. If he could kill him, not to mention these ships, he would be willing to give up the entire canal. Hearing the sound of horse hooves approaching again, Little Seven looked at Gong Dai's back. He didn't dare to speak. The rain fell on his face, but it chilled his heart. There was a collapsed mountain in front of this road. It had long been blocked. They couldn't pass at all, and behind them, there were more pursuers. From the number of pursuers, they knew that there were many of them. They were afraid that they wouldn't even be enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. But Gong Dai kept looking forward. At this time, he was soaked, but his eyes were shockingly bright. He seemed to be eager to try. Lightning flashed in the sky from time to time, making people panic. If it wasn't for Gong Dai's strict management of the army and their blind trust in Gong Dai, they wouldn't want to take this road that was full of death. Gong Yimo had succeeded. There were corpses all over the ground. She carried the unconscious Bai Ji out of the place where he was imprisoned. Gong Yimo quickly escaped, not daring to delay for even a moment. The monkey was squatting on her other shoulder. Gong Yimo was still very friendly towards this kind of godly assistance. This was the deepest part of the camp. Lu Jin hid well, but the little monkey was smart and petite. It was also very fast. No one was on guard against it. But Bai Ji was still quite heavy. Gong Yimo weighed him and continued forward. "There's an assassin." This shout was like a raging inferno, causing everyone to walk out. And from afar, Lu Jin heard the voice and was shocked. He never expected that someone would risk their life for a stranger. One person against 10,000 soldiers. He looked at Bai Chio gloomily and reached out to grab him. Without Bai Ji, this person could also be used as a hostage. At this critical moment, Bai Chio threw the thing in his hand to the ground. In an instant, a loud explosion made everyone in the tent look down. But they realized that although this thing looked scary, it didn't have any killing power. But when they came back to their senses, Bai Chio was nowhere to be seen. At this critical moment, Bai Chio ran away. Lu Jin couldn't care less. Bai Ji was more important. How hateful. When he saw Gong Yimo tolerating Bai Chio, he thought that she really liked him. He didn't expect that she deliberately created an illusion. She used Bai Chio to deceive them and turn around to save Bai Ji. Really? How hateful. The whole camp was mobilized. The momentum was still very scary. Bai Chio took advantage of the chaos to knock out a person and put on his armor. Then, he frantically searched for Gong Yimo's figure. He had to admit that when he was in the tent, he was more worried about Gong Yimo than he was about his father. How could a woman be so daring? Was she really not afraid of death? Death? Of course, Gong Yimo was afraid. But she was alone. Without Bai Chio to drag her down, she carried Bai Ji and fought her way out. It wasn't too difficult. Of course, it wouldn't be too easy. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.